Chapter 1134. In recent times, ancient freaks had frequently appeared out of nowhere and roamed the world. Each of them was outstanding, and their limelight had completely overshadowed the talents of the present age. Until now, no one had defeated an ancient freak, and it could even be said that almost all of them were fated to be suppressed. But today, demon god Lin, who had been silent for 2 months, had appeared out of nowhere and easily suppressed Jin Xiaoming, an ancient freak of the Golden King snake lineage. The significance of this was too extraordinary. If the news got out, demon god Lin was destined to be crowned as the first ancient freak to be suppressed, and the whole world would pay attention to him. At this moment, the mountain and the foot of the mountain were all shaken and couldn't calm down. Everyone looked at Lin Sun with admiration and awe. Even the insufferably arrogant Jin Xiaoming had been suppressed, which was enough to make anyone exclaim in admiration. Alas, the limelight has been stolen. Old Toad heaved a long sigh, looking lonely. Alu patted him on the shoulder as if they were in the same boat, and said, "It's okay. There will be many opportunities in the future." At this moment, Jin Xiaoming was confined and covered in blood and wounds as he lay on the ground. However, there was no fear, anger, or unwillingness on his face. On the contrary, he was unusually cold and calm. "I admit that I underestimated you before, but this is only a doppelganger of mine. If my original body came, it would be hard to say who would win," Jin Xiaoming said coldly. A doppelganger. As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked. Chi Chongdo and the others were a little surprised and doubtful. A doppelganger was so powerful? If what Jin Xiaoming said was true, then it was terrifying. Lin Sun, however, had a look of realization and said, "No wonder you're so weak. However, since your doppelganger is so weak, I don't think your original body is that strong." His words were casual, but it was completely different in everyone's ears. They all felt an invisible strength and domineering aura. Jin Xiaoming was so angry that he almost coughed up blood. He had thought that Lin Sun would be afraid, but who would have thought that this guy would have such a reaction? Lin Sun still regarded him as too weak and didn't take him seriously. This was undoubtedly a kind of contempt for his combat strength, and it was very direct and rude. "I heard that snake meat is also a great tonic. It can be boiled into snake soup, which is one of the world's delicacies. It's very good." Lin Sun looked Jin Xiaoming up and down as if he was looking at a fine ingredient. Jin Xiaoming instantly felt a chill run down his spine as his jade-green pupils constricted rapidly, and he was completely unable to maintain his composure. This guy actually wanted to eat him. Jin Xiaoming was a bit stupefied. He was an ancient freak, yet now he was treated as food. This was too great of a blow to his self-esteem. The others also had strange expressions on their faces. The rumors were indeed true. Not only was demon god Lin extremely courageous, but his appetite was also unparalleled. He was planning to eat the clone of an ancient freak. If word got out, who would dare to believe it? "You better not act rashly. So long as a trace of mishap occurs to my clone, my main body will surely charge over at the first possible moment." Jin Xiaoming's expression was livid as he spoke with a threatening tone. "Your main body is coming as well? That would be great. We can cook both the deity and the doppelganger together," Lin Sun said casually. "You." Jin Xiaoming almost collapsed. This was the first time he had seen such a stubborn and overbearing character. He took a deep breath and said word by word, "Do you know that if you offend me, you will offend the golden heavenly snake lineage? Moreover, some ancient freaks that I once swore allegiance to won't let you off." "Noisy." Lin Sun slapped him until he coughed up blood and several teeth fell off. "No matter who it is, no matter which ancient freak it is, they can't save you." All the cultivators present were trembling. Was Demon God Lin declaring war? The world had been waiting for too long. They were all looking forward to peerless figures such as Yun Qingbai, Wang Xuanyu, Mi Hongjin, Yi Mo, Yin Zhanxiu, and Lin Sun to attack. Because the ancient freaks had been traveling around the world recently and had almost swept away all the contemporary heroes. This made the younger generation somewhat unable to raise their heads, and their hearts were filled with unwillingness. Many people were looking forward to the ancient freaks being defeated. Lin Sun, you probably don't know how powerful the ancient freaks are. Our foundation is beyond your imagination, far better than that of the contemporary generation. There are countless peerless figures who have set foot in the reaching realm, and even some born saints and spiritual embryos. Jin Xiaoming's voice was gloomy. If you choose to be our enemy, I'm afraid you can't bear the consequences at all. Lin Sun sneered. You want to represent the ancient freaks in the world? You'd better shut up. Threats don't work on me at all. If you annoy me, I don't mind stewing you now. Jin Xiaoming's face was gloomy. He could feel that although Lin Sun's words were casual, he absolutely dared to do so. In fact, Jin Xiaoming's previous words still caused great waves and shocked all the cultivators present. There were countless peerless figures who had set foot in the reaching realm. If this was true, the overall strength of the ancient freaks was undoubtedly too horrible. I just want to remind you that some really horrible figures haven't shown their strength so far. Even if you're the best peerless figure in the present age, you can't be their opponent when the great era comes. Jin Xiaoming obviously restrained his words and dared not contradict Lin Sun, but there was still a hint of threat in his words. But to his disappointment, Lin Sun's expression didn't change at all when he heard these words, as if he didn't care about all this at all. Could this fellow really be a fearless devil god? Jin Xiaoming was a little discouraged. Seeing this, the cultivators present finally dared to confirm one thing: that Demon Lin, who had come out of silence, was no longer afraid of any so-called ancient freaks. They could even feel that Lin Sun was even looking forward to fighting with the strongest of those ancient freaks. In fact, it was not that Lin Sun was arrogant, but that he had developed an invincible and disdainful aura. He was fearless of everything, which could only be achieved when he was extremely strong. Lin Sun even dared to assert that no one who had reached his level would be afraid of fighting, nor would they be affected by some threats. Mi Hongjin, who accepted the challenge of the ancient freak by Longting a few hours ago, must have such courage. Otherwise, it was impossible for him to accept such a challenge as the host of the Gathering of Thousand Streams. As for Jin Xiaoming, although he was an ancient freak, he was not as bold as Mi Hongjin. After being defeated, he still threatened Lin Sun, hoping to frighten Lin Sun with the fame of others. This was enough to prove that in Jin Xiaoming's mind, even if he came in person, he might not be sure to win. Soon, the atmosphere on Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain became lively again. Everyone discussed and communicated with each other with tea instead of wine, which was very harmonious. Lin Sun, Old Toad, and Alu also became the focus of the gathering. They were surrounded by many cultivators and chatted with each other like stars surrounding the moon. As for Jin Xiaoming, who was imprisoned on the ground, he was directly ignored. It's been so long. Why hasn't fellow practitioner Mi Hongjin returned? Could it be? Someone spoke out worriedly. Mi Hongjin was the host of this gathering. Now he wanted to fight with Bai Longting, but he didn't return. How could people not worry about him? Where's your real body? Why hasn't it come? I'm waiting to stew you all together. Lin Sun looked at Jin Xiaoming. Jin Xiaoming's face was extremely ugly, and he snorted, I'm not afraid to tell you that my real body is at 10 Mile Slope, watching the fight between Mi Hongjin and Bai Longting. If you really have the guts, you can go there yourself. 10 Mile Slope. This was indeed the place where Mi Hongjin and Bai Longting would fight. However, none of the cultivators present expected that Jin Xiaoming's real body was also at 10 Mile Slope. Obviously, his doppelganger had already confirmed that Mi Hongjin was not there before coming to Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain this time. Perhaps that was why he dared to make trouble so fearlessly. Where is 10 Mile Slope? Lin Sun asked Chi Chongdo. It's 16,000 miles away. Chi Chongdo suddenly realized something and said, Brother Lin, are you going there? Let's go and have a look. Lin Sun had made up his mind. Mi Hongjin was really one of the most amazing figures in the world, and his fame was well known everywhere. And Bai Longting was a dazzling figure among the ancient freaks. The fight between the two was also very attractive to Lin Sun. However, just as Lin Sun was about to take action, an ancient warship suddenly rushed over from the distant sky. The pattern of the sun and the moon appeared on the battlefield, and with bright light, it broke through the clouds and quickly approached. It's the warship of Sun Moon Palace. Senior brother Mi Hungjin is back. Chi Chondo's eyes lit up, and he was in high spirits. At the same time, everyone also saw a majestic figure standing on the warship. He was bathed in the sunlight and moonlight, and his style was extremely outstanding. Looking carefully, it was a handsome and elegant young man with wide sleeves and a wide belt. His eyebrows were wide, and his forehead was smooth. Some people could tell at a glance that he was extraordinary and unique, just like Mi Hungjin, who appeared at this moment. However, before everyone could cheer, they saw a green divine rainbow behind the warship, tearing the void and approaching at incredible speed. At the same time, Jin Xiaoming, who was imprisoned on the ground, was shocked, and a touch of joy burst out of his green eyes. Moreover, everyone noticed that the green divine ray of light was surprisingly controlled by a young man that was exactly similar to Jin Xiaoming. Without a doubt, this must be Jin Xiaoming himself. Fellow Taoist, you've been following me all the way. Do you also want to imitate by Longting and fight with me? In the sky, the warship stopped. Mi Hungjin suddenly looked back at Jin Xiaoming, who was rushing over. Humph, you think too much. My doppelganger is trapped on Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain. I'm here to see who dares to suppress me. Jin Xiaoming snorted coldly, and his voice shook the world like thunder. Mi Hungjin was stunned and seemed a little surprised. He said, "There's actually someone who can suppress your doppelganger on Thousand Streams Mountain? I'd like to get to know such an outstanding talent." His voice was filled with curiosity. Jin Xiaoming's face sank. He thought Mi Hungjin's words carried a sense of gloating. As they talked, they'd already arrived before Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain. And at this moment, Jin Xiaoming had already shouted, "Who dares to bully my doppelganger? Get out here." Chapter 1135. Mi Hungjin's return made people feel at ease, no matter who won the battle between him and Bai Longting. The arrival of Jin Xiaoming's original body made Qianlu's spirit mountain shrouded in a layer of gloomy clouds, causing everyone's heart to tremble. Too strong. As soon as he arrived, he revealed endless killing intent. "Get out!" The cold shout was still reverberating, causing the world to shake, the grass, trees, and rocks to crack, and the cultivators' eardrums to be almost torn and their qi and blood to surge. Jin Xiaoming's original body stood indifferently in the void, with a blood-red robe, golden hair, and green eyes. He was like a god of death overlooking the world. In fact, the moment he arrived here, he had already got in touch with his doppelganger and learned what had happened on Qianlu Spirit Mountain. In an instant, he fixed his green eyes on Lin Sun. At the same time, Chi Chongdo also told Mi Hungjin everything that had happened before. Then, Mi Hungjin also fixed his eyes on Lin Sun, with undisguised appreciation and curiosity in his eyes. Demon Lin. He had heard this name many times. When he saw Lin Sun today, he suddenly had a feeling that he was worthy of his reputation. Because Lin Sun dared to challenge an ancient freak so strongly, Mi Hungjin really had a good impression of Lin Sun. At the same time, Lin Sun also felt the gaze from Mi Hungjin and Jin Xiaoming's original body. In the face of Jin Xiaoming's undisguised killing intent, Lin Sun's expression remained unchanged, and he glanced sideways at Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger confined on the ground. Then he said, "Do you think that I didn't kill him because I didn't dare?" Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger was originally overjoyed, thinking that he would be saved, but when he heard Lin Sun's words, he suddenly felt cold all over. At the same time, Jin Xiaoming's original body in the sky changed his expression, and he suddenly shouted, "How dare you!" Lin Sun smiled slightly and stretched out his hand to slap. Bang! The head of Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger was directly smashed, and even a wisp of spirit in his body was erased. Clatter, a rain of blood sprayed. All the cultivators in the field were shocked, and their eyes widened in disbelief. Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger was directly killed in front of him. Such methods were truly too domineering and shocking. Even Mi Hungjin was slightly taken aback. Then, he couldn't help but laugh. There was surprise in his eyes, as well as admiration. On the other hand, Jin Xiaoming's expression instantly became extremely unsightly. Losing a clone didn't affect him too much, but a clone was killed right before his eyes, and it caused Jin Xiaoming to feel that it was an extremely great provocation. Boom! The aura around his body instantly became terrifying. His blood-red robe fluttered, and a dazzling green light rose and enveloped his entire body. "You are courting death." Jin Xiaoming spoke word by word while his golden hair fluttered, and his terrifying, imposing aura caused this expanse of the heavens and the earth to dim down, causing many cultivators to feel it was difficult to even breathe. Anyone could tell that the power of Jin Xiaoming's main body was far stronger than his clone. However, Lin Sun seemed to be unaware of it. He ordered casually, "Old Toad, dissect this dead snake. Alu, prepare a pot, and cook a pot of golden king snake soup for all the people here." "Okay." Old Toad agreed readily. "Leave it to me." Alu patted his chest and said with a grin, and you all have to die." Jin Xiaoming was so angry that green light burst out from his pupils. He couldn't restrain himself any longer and rushed down from the sky. As he waved his hand, a green divine rainbow that was as thick as a waterfall fell down. Boom! The void collapsed, and the green divine rainbow seemed to be invincible. "Do you want to kill me with my permission?" Mi Hungjin's figure suddenly flashed, and his big hand drew and drew in the void, as if he was cutting yin and yang. A perfectly round pattern emerged, in which the sun and the moon were floating and sinking. The perfectly round pattern of the sun and the moon rotated slightly in the void, and then the green divine rainbow was obliterated, leaving not a single drop. Lin Sun's black eyes lit up. Mi Hungjin's single strike showed his extraordinary combat attainments. He deserved to be one of the strongest figures in the present age. "Mi Hungjin, you were seriously injured in the battle with Bai Longting. Do you still want to fight with me?" Jin Xiaoming's face was gloomy. Seriously injured. Everyone was shocked and couldn't believe it. From the outside, they couldn't see any trace of injury on Mi Hungjin. But Mi Hungjin said indifferently, "This Thousand Streams grand meeting was initiated by me. As the host, even if I'm injured, I can't watch my guests being bullied." His words were casual, but they revealed a sense of disdain and determination. He was elegant and handsome. He seemed to be a gentle person, but in fact, he had a peerless demeanor. Once he showed his sharpness, the world seemed to be dimmed. This was Mi Hungjin, the leader of the younger generation of Sun Moon Palace, and also a great figure who had been famous for many years. His demeanor was really admirable. "So if I want to kill this man, you won't stand by and do nothing?" Jin Xiaoming's face was livid and extremely cold. "Yes," Mi Hungjin said without hesitation. "This time, your doppelganger came to Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain to make trouble while I was away, which is unforgivable. Now you dare to threaten to kill me. Do you really think that I, Mi Hungjin, am a soft persimmon that can be pinched at will?" Chi Chongdo and the others were all excited, with admiration on their faces. Even Lin Sun had to admit that Mi Hungjin deserved his respect for his courage and responsibility. However, respect was respect, and the matter was the matter. The next moment, Lin Sun rose into the air and said, "I'm waiting here to cook a pot of snake soup. Brother Mi, please let me kill this longworm." Longworm. Hearing such a title, everyone's expression was a little strange. So was Mi Hungjin. He glanced at Lin Sun in a daze, as if he was shocked by Lin's courage. Then he laughed and said, "In that case, I won't do anything unnecessary." After that, he took the initiative to step aside. Ha ha ha. At this time, Jin Xiaoming was so angry that he laughed. Since he was born, it was the first time for him to see someone who dared to blaspheme his dignity. Boom! He didn't want to talk nonsense at all and directly attacked. He raised his hand and took out a bloody spear. The spear tore the void with a rumble, and the tip of the spear was like a dragon as it galloped towards Lin Sun. This spear was overbearing, ruthless, swift, and contained the terrifying power of the Great Way. As soon as the spear stabbed out, the bloody light shocked the world. It was indeed different from the combat strength of the doppelganger. In an instant, Lin Sun judged that the strength of Jin Xiaoming was much stronger than that of the doppelganger, and it brought great pressure to Lin Sun. However, this was exactly what Lin Sun wanted to see. Clang! The broken blade suddenly appeared in the void. It was as white as snow, illusory and resplendent, and a strand of the power of the great way of water covered it, showing an invincible sharpness. Lin Sun didn't use this treasure when he fought with Jin Xiaoming's doppelganger before. Bang! The broken blade and the bloody spear collided, and they instantly fought fiercely in the void. The saber light was like lightning, and the spear's shadow was layer upon layer, breaking the clouds in all directions. Jin Xiaoming's pupils constricted. As soon as they fought, he'd realized how strong Lin Sun was, and he sobered up from his rage and started to attack with his full strength. He circulated the blood-red spear to the limit. Everywhere the tip of the spear pointed, numerous horrifying rifts were torn open in the void, and the sky was dyed blood-red. The furious howls of a bloody sea and the howls of ghosts and deities could be faintly heard, and its impetus was extremely shocking. The cultivators in the surroundings were dazzled by the sight of this, and all of them were unable to calm down. The formidableness of Jin Xiaoming's main body caused them to have the misconception that they were suffocating. Compared to him, his doppelganger was obviously much dimmer. It was no wonder that Jin Xiaoming dared to be so domineering. He was all alone and utterly unafraid of Mi Hongzhen, and he directly made a move on Thousand Flow Spirit Mountain with the intention of crushing and killing Demon God Lin to wash away the humiliation he suffered. Mi Hongzhen had a serious expression as he stared fixedly at the battlefield. He naturally discerned that Jin Xiaoming was formidable, and Jin Xiaoming was an overlord amongst peerless figures and wasn't formidable in the sense of the mortal world. He'd already made preparations to make a move at any moment. This Thousand Flow meeting was started by him, and Xiao Qinghe, who invited Lin Sun this time, was his junior brother as well. Under such circumstances, it was naturally impossible for him to allow the possibility of Lin Sun being killed to occur. But in next to no time, Mi Hongzhen noticed to his surprise that Lin Sun was actually at a complete disadvantage in the intense battle with Jin Xiaoming. Moreover, Lin Sun's combat strength was so formidable that it surprised even him. This kid is clearly of the same generation as junior brother Xiao Qinghe, but his attainments in the peerless path of cultivation have obviously attained the peak level, and he's much more formidable than the former number one on the minor tycoon rankings. It's even to the extent that even if he participates in the star ranking competition of the Four Realms, it's sufficient for him to firmly take the first place. With Mi Hongzhen's knowledge and experience, he instantly determined that the combat strength Lin Sun possessed had long since exceeded the scope of a minor tycoon, and it caused him to be extremely amazed. No wonder junior brother Xiao Qinghe admires and holds him in such high esteem. Such a figure is indeed one of the very few outstanding figures in the younger generation of the world. Mi Hongzhen sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. Strictly speaking, he, Wang Xuanyu, Yi Mo, and Yin Zhanqiu could only be considered as veteran peerless figures. They'd made their debut early, and practically all of them were above the age of 30. But Lin Sun was different. He was still very young, and it had only been a few years since he came to the ancient desolation domain from the mortal world, yet he'd already become a renowned figure in the world. This seemed to be too extraordinary. If this kid participates in the great event this time, then perhaps we'll have a better chance of securing victory. Mi Hongzhen seemed to be lost in thought. Bang! A fierce battle continued to erupt beneath the sky. Lin Sun and Jin Xiaoming had already fought fiercely for a few hundred rounds, and they fought to the point the heavens and the earth were dim while the sun and moon dimmed, and the battle was extremely intense. Strictly speaking, the battle with Jin Xiaoming's main body could be considered to be the first time Lin Sun fought an ancient freak in the true sense of the word. As for Jin Xiaoming's clone, it seemed to be slightly insufficient in the end. Jin Xiaoming grew more and more shocked as the battle progressed, and his expression grew more and more solemn. He didn't dare underestimate Lin Sun any longer, and he took Lin Sun to be a formidable enemy of the world. On the other hand, Lin Sun grew more and more courageous as the battle progressed, and his black eyes burned with a surging battle intent. It couldn't be said to be an evenly matched match, and it was utterly impossible for them to appreciate each other. But Jin Xiaoming's formidableness really caused Lin Sun to be excited. After all, it was indeed too difficult for one to encounter an opponent that was worthy of a battle when one attained a cultivation like his. The thing that everyone didn't know whether to laugh or cry was that such an unparalleled battle at the peak had drawn the attention of everyone present. Yet there were two people that were different. One was Old Toad, and he was dissecting the body of a 3 kilometers long golden snake. His hands were tainted with blood, and he seemed like a butcher slaughtering pork with skilled movements while humming a tune. The other was Alu. He'd set up a campfire and a large iron wok, and he was boiling water with dexterous movements while waiting for the ingredients to enter the wok. This caused all the cultivators that noticed this scene to be speechless. These two fellows are really careless, and they aren't worried about demonic Godlin's safety in the slightest. P.S. I'm ashamed that the update has been delayed again tonight. How about this? If the normal 2 updates for this month aren't released after 11 p.m., then Gene will release an extra chapter on the next day. Chapter 1136. Under the sky, Lin Sun dashed forward. The broken blade was like a dazzling bolt of lightning. It wasn't only fast, but it also emitted an all-conquering power. The more he fought, the stronger he became. Jin Xiaoming's expression was extremely solemn, although the bloody spear was operated to the limit by him, and it was so powerful that every strike could easily kill a genius of the present age. But facing the attack of the broken blade, he was exhausted to resist. How could he be so strong? Jin Xiaoming was shocked and furious. His qi and blood surged all over his body. He couldn't believe that Lin Sun, who was just the first on the list of minor giants, possessed a combat strength that was sufficient to compete with the top giants. Lin Sun's fighting spirit burst out. His whole body was suffused with dazzling green divine light, and he pushed forward in the sky like a demon. Every single slash revealed boundlessly terrifying might. There was the scene of a myriad of stars falling. There was the scene of the moon filling the night sky and the sun illuminating the universe. There was the momentum of silence and the world returning to silence. There was also the profundity of life and death in an instant. The 6 slashes of Tianyuan was deduced to the extreme by the truth of water, and its power was activated by the fury of the eye and the battle saint technique, causing the world to be filled with dazzling sharpness. Under such pressure, Jin Xiaoming was already faintly being suppressed. Not to mention launching a counterattack, even parrying seemed to be difficult for him, and his strength was insufficient. Clang! After a moment, after an earth-shattering collision, Jin Xiaoming's figure trembled as if he had been electrocuted, and then he suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood while his face suddenly turned pale. Everyone was shocked. When Lin Sun suppressed Jin Xiaoming's clone before, it had already made their hearts tremble. Now, he actually seemed to have the strength to suppress Jin Xiaoming himself. Amazing! Mi Hongxin's eyes lit up. Watching Lin Sun's battle caused his heart to be slightly restless, and his desire to fight was ignited. Boom! In the sky, Jin Xiaoming's expression was livid, and he didn't say a single word as he flicked his sleeve, causing the golden carriage that was originally confined on Thousand Flow Spirit Mountain to suddenly soar into the sky, and it emanated 7-color divine radiance that suffused the surroundings. Jin Xiaoming's figure flashed, and he stepped onto the golden chariot. In an instant, his whole body was covered by a sacred aura, and his power suddenly rose. Obviously, he wasn't fleeing, but using the chariot as a chariot to attack with all his strength. Bang! The broken blade attacked with a snow-white brilliance that was as bright as day. However, the Tao pattern diagram that appeared on the battlefield displayed the ancient 100 Perils diagram and easily neutralized this slash. On the other hand, Jin Xiaoming stood proudly on the treasure carriage with a cold expression as he said, "This carriage is a sacred object, and it's called the Vicious Cloud Carriage. It was refined from the souls of ancient vicious beasts, and it's branded with the markings of Saint Tao laws. Since you're able to force me to utilize it, you can die in peace." Everyone's hearts trembled and they gasped. The power of a holy treasure was different, but all of them could be said to be heaven-defying. A reincarnation development realm cultivator might not be able to unleash the true power of a holy treasure, but with just a portion of its power, it was enough to dominate the world. Rumble. The vicious cloud chariot galloped forward, crushing the void and rushing to Lin's son. The vivid, ancient, vicious chariot appeared around Jin Xiaoming, and the aura of the divine Tao soared into the sky, making Jin Xiaoming look like a god of slaughter on the battlefield. Everyone's expressions changed, and they found it difficult to breathe. If Lin's son didn't have a holy treasure, he was bound to feel that it was extremely tricky and even difficult to compete with it. However, it was obvious that this situation was not a problem for him. Buzz. The wordless pagoda soared into the sky, and the octagonal body of the pagoda glowed brightly like the sun. It sat in the middle of the sky and reflected the vast general trend. Instantly, the momentum of the vicious cloud chariot's charge forward was obstructed, and it was restrained by the wordless pagoda. Two different holy treasures emitted divine power in the void, and they fought with each other, causing the void there to collapse, and cracks that were thousands of meters long appeared. It was too gorgeous, and it was filled with a terrifying aura of destruction. It made one's scalp go numb just by looking at it from afar, and a chill ran down their spines. Clang! At the same time, Lin Sun had already charged again, and the broken blade was like a waterfall that slashed across the nine heavens. In next to no time, Jin Xiaoming was unable to resist, and he was heavily injured and coughed up blood. Originally, he had placed his hopes on the vicious cloud chariot to kill Lin's son, but never had he imagined that this treasure was actually firmly restrained by the wordless pagoda in Lin Sun's hand, and it was utterly unable to exert its power. Crack! It wasn't long before the broken blade emitted a terrifying, murderous aura, and it cut off a section of Jin Xiaoming's blood-red spear. Moreover, it shook Jin Xiaoming to the point that he staggered and almost fell off the vicious cloud chariot. Bang! Subsequently, Lin Sun flashed and suddenly rushed to the front. The wordless pagoda above his head flowed with brilliance, firmly suppressing the vicious cloud chariot. He stretched out his hand and grabbed Jin Xiaoming's arm, as if he wanted to capture Jin Xiaoming alive. A series of actions happened in a split second, and it was extremely fast. Get lost! Jin Xiaoming was so shocked that his soul almost flew out of his body. He suddenly urged all his strength in an attempt to blow Lin Sun away. Unexpectedly, Lin Sun's palm and fingers were like iron hoop, and he suddenly operated the power of star obliteration and devour sky. The sound of bones breaking and flesh breaking followed. Jin Xiaoming's face changed dramatically. For the first time, he felt a fatal threat. Lin Sun's power was like an immeasurable abyss, and it seemed to swallow him whole. Puff! In an instant, his right arm was torn off, and a rain of blood sprinkled. Boom! At the same time, Jin Xiaoming let out a painful and furious roar. The vicious cloud chariot rushed up and instantly teleported him thousands of meters away. It was also at this time that the practitioners on and at the foot of the mountain reacted, and they immediately became restless. He tore off a right arm. Someone cried out involuntarily. Demon Lin is too strong. Many practitioners were scared out of their wits. In Lin Sun's hand, a broken arm was dripping with blood. It was torn off by him, and the wound was still gurgling with blood, which sprinkled in the void like a sad and beautiful rain of blood. Whoosh! Lin Sun casually threw the broken arm to Qianlu's spirit mountain. With a plop, it accurately fell into a big pot set up by a Lu. On the other side, Jin Xiaoming's face was distorted and ferocious, and his forehead was covered with sweat. His arm was torn off, which made him feel pain, but also unprecedented fear. It could be said that this was the most serious injury he had suffered since he was born. In the past, he had never suffered such a heavy setback. All the people present were boiling and shocked. Until today, an ancient freak is finally going to be defeated. Everyone realized that this was destined to be a sensational news. Jin Xiaoming had never been defeated since he was born. Before that, countless peerless figures were defeated by him. But today, such a turning point happened, which was like subverting their perception and cognition and made everyone realize that ancient freaks were not invincible. Ah, Jin Xiaoming roared. He was so angry that his eyes almost popped out of their sockets, and he was about to go mad. He couldn't accept all this. Unfortunately, Lin Sun didn't intend to let him go. He took advantage of this opportunity to rush over and cut out the broken sword like a divine rainbow. In the end, Jin Xiaoming suppressed his grief, indignation, and humiliation and drove the carriage of calamity to flee. He possessed special good fortune and opportunities, and after remaining silent until now, his cultivation had long reached the absolute peak. However, today he was actually injured time and time again. This caused him to feel unwillingness as well as fear. He realized that if he didn't leave now, he would really die here. How could Lin Sun let him escape? He went all out and rushed forward. Bang! Jin Xiaoming's whole body shook violently, and a large amount of blood spilled. He was seriously injured, and his neck was almost cut off. Half of his body was broken. But in the end, he escaped and was taken by the carriage of calamity to break the void and flee in a hurry. Lin Sun was about to chase him, but Mi Hongjin had stepped forward and said, "Brother Lin, don't chase him. Even if you catch him, you can't kill him." Lin Sun also saw that the carriage of calamity was a holy treasure. If it wanted to take Jin Xiaoming away, it would be really difficult to stop it. But he was a little puzzled. Why can't I kill him even if I catch him? Mi Hongjin said, all ancient freaks have absolute means to save their lives. Even the old monsters of the king realm can't kill them. For example, the golden cicada jade talisman needed to escape, the life-saving talisman given by the sage, and some other means to save their lives. After a pause, he continued, after all, every ancient freak carries the hope of an orthodoxy or a tribe. It's impossible to kill them so easily. Lin Sun was a little unwilling, but he also knew that what Mi Hongjin said was true. He had learned from the old toad that ancient freaks were like frozen seeds, invested with the efforts of a great force. Such people were all 1 in a million geniuses. If they were killed, all the efforts of a tribe would be in vain, and their hope would be shattered. Therefore, in order to prevent any accident from occurring, these ancient freaks had hidden life-saving trump cards that no one knew about. It didn't take long for Lin Sun and Mi Hongjin to return to Thousand Streams Mountain. At this time, on the mountain and at the foot of the mountain, there was already an uproar. Countless uproars and exclamations rose and fell like tides. Jin Xiaoming, a real ancient freak, not only was his doppelganger suppressed, but also his original body was severely defeated and finally fled in panic. Before this, no one had expected such an ending. And Lin Sun, who defeated Jin Xiaoming, suddenly became the focus of attention. He deserves to be the invincible Demon Lin. This exclamation resonated unanimously. Thinking of Demon Lin's past achievements and comparing them with today's victory, everyone found that Demon Lin had never been defeated by his peers since he wandered around the world. This was incredible. From today on, the legend of invincible ancient freaks has been broken, and all this is thanks to Demon Lin. Many people felt a sense of pride and elation. Recently, contemporary practitioners in the world have been suppressed by those ancient freaks to the point that they couldn't even lift their heads. There was a sense of depression in their hearts. Now, they could finally release it. Thousand Streams Mountain was also bustling at this moment. Mi Hongjin's return made Chi Chongdo and others feel like they had found their backbone. And the battle in which Lin Sun defeated Jin Xiaoming made all the practitioners who participated in this gathering excited and honored. However, Soon everyone was attracted by a tempting smell of meat. Many practitioners couldn't help swallowing their saliva secretly and looked at a big pot. The lively atmosphere in the field was suddenly changed. Alu was boiling snake soup, and within the large wok were pieces of jade white and crystalline snake meat that were boiling and bubbling while emitting the fragrance of meat that suffused the surroundings. The smell seemed as if it could penetrate the soul, and it caused one to be utterly unable to hold back. Even Lin Sun wiped his saliva without a trace and said in surprise, "It seems to taste a little better than the black nightmare dog meat." Chapter 1137. On Qianlu's spiritual mountain, the tempting aroma of meat permeated the air with a mouth-watering fragrance. The meat of the golden heavenly snake was indeed delicious, and there was no need to add any seasoning at all. After the snow-white meat was cooked, it flowed with brilliant spiritual light and contained amazing spiritual essence. After all, this was the meat of an ancient freak which couldn't be eaten at all. Old Toad and Alu ate to their heart's content, and their mouths glowed. Lin Sun didn't stand on ceremony. He drank and ate the meat happily. Originally, other practitioners were still a little reluctant and afraid, because if it was spread out that they had also eaten Jin Xiaoming's meat, the consequences would be a little serious. But in the end, they couldn't bear the temptation of this delicious food and joined the team of eating meat and drinking soup. After a little taste, it was really wonderful. Immediately, they couldn't care less about losing their manners and gobbled up the food. Even some dignified and reserved women didn't care about their image at this moment. If Jin Xiaoming saw this scene, he would probably die of anger. He was a descendant of the golden heavenly snake, but now his doppelganger was shared as food, which was undoubtedly a great shame. "Senior brother me, who won the battle between you and Bai Longting?" Chi Chongdo finally couldn't help asking. Suddenly, everyone's attention was drawn to him. Bai Longting was an ancient freak of the White Jiao bloodline. He was invincible and had monstrous combat power. In terms of prestige, he was even more famous than Jin Xiaoming. Mi Hongjin thought for a while and said, "This battle was very hard. After several hours, there was no winner or loser. Although I was seriously injured in the end, Bai Longting didn't have a good time either. In fact, this battle can only be regarded as a draw." When he spoke up at this point, he smiled and said, "Of course, because there are many people of the same generation watching our battle, both I and Bai Longting didn't utilize our true trump cards. If we didn't do that, it's very likely that we would have died together." He said it easily, but everyone knew that this battle was bound to be extremely tragic. After all, both Mi Hongjin and Bai Longting were peerless powerhouses. A draw would damage their reputations. If they had the confidence to win, no one would accept a draw. In Brother Mi's opinion, how powerful are these ancient freaks that have been born? Lin Sun asked. Mi Hongjin's expression turned serious. He pondered for a long time before he said, "He's very powerful. In the current era, only peerless giants who have reached the peak can fight against him. The others in the same generation are all slightly inferior." As soon as he said that, everyone's mood became heavy. With Mi Hongjin's identity, there was no way he would say something that would diminish his own prestige and boost others' morale. Since he made such a deduction, it was enough to prove how terrifying those ancient freaks were. The following exchanges almost all revolved around the ancient freaks. A group of practitioners sat down to discuss and analyze the situation of the world, so that Lin Sun also learned a lot of news. For example, the current world's apex figures were roughly divided into 3 types. One was the current generation's apex powerhouses, such as Mi Hongjin, Wang Xuanyu, Yimo, Yin Zhanxiu, and so on. The other type were monstrous figures from the Saint Hermit grounds, and there was no lack of innate geniuses and spirit embryos amongst them. However, all of them had yet to truly emerge into the world. Only when the apex domain came would these monstrous figures come into the world. This reminded Lin Sun of Lu Kaiwei from the Saint Hermit grounds and Mu Zheng, the successor of the earthly scripture temple. The third type would be the ancient freaks that have been appearing frequently in recent times. How does Yin Qingbai compare with these figures? Lin Sun suddenly asked. As soon as this question came out, The whole place fell silent, as if this name had a strange magic power. Even Mi Hungjin narrowed his eyes and glanced at Lin Sun with a slightly strange look, saying, as early as when I participated in the 4-star list competition, Yun Qingbai was already the first person below the king realm. No one in the world can doubt his strength. After 10 years of closed-door cultivation, I can only say that Yun Qingbai is stronger and more unfathomable than before. As an ancient orthodoxy, the heaven-reaching sword sect is also a great force inherited from ancient times. Not long ago, an ancient freak named Duanmu Zi was born in the heaven-reaching sword sect, and the limelight directly overshadowed Yun Qingbai. Speaking of this, Mi Hungjin's expression became subtle. There was a trace of admiration or amazement between his eyebrows. But do you know what the result was? Everyone pricked up their ears. It was the first time they had heard such a secret. As a result, on the second day after Duanmuzi was born, he took the initiative to visit Yun Qingbai's dwelling place and toasted Yun Qingbai 3 times. As soon as this remark came out, the whole place fell silent. An ancient freak paid a visit and toasted Yun Qingbai on his own initiative, which was too surprising. If Duanmuzi had the confidence to defeat Yun Qingbai, he would not have condescended like this. However, he put on such a humble attitude in front of Yun Qingbai, which can only prove that he either admits that he is inferior to Yun Qingbai or doesn't want to become enemies with Yun Qingbai. Either way, it is enough to prove that today's Yun Qingbai is powerful enough to make ancient freaks fear him. Speaking of this, Mi Hungjin couldn't help but sigh. This is Yun Qingbai. No one will ever know how powerful he is. Lin Sun remained calm and said indifferently, no matter how powerful he is only at the level of reincarnation developing realm. He is not invincible. Everyone was stunned and couldn't help but smile bitterly. Perhaps only demon god Lin dared to say such words in this world. Who else dared to say such words? Mi Hungjin was injured, so the 7,000 Flow Grand gathering had to end in advance. That night, Mi Hungjin found Lin Sun alone and said directly, "Brother Lin, the land of apoplexy will come soon. My Sun Moon Palace has an incomplete map about a heaven-defying fortune in the land of apoplexy. Are you interested?" Lin Sun was stunned and said, "Can you tell me more about it?" Mi Hungjin said, "You also know that the land of apoplexy has come many times in ancient times, but some great fortunes and opportunities are sealed and can't be obtained. But this great world is different from the past. It is an extremely brilliant world. As long as the land of apoplexy comes, some fortunes sealed in it may be seized." Lin Sun nodded. He had heard these secrets from Old Toad. The incomplete map in Sun Moon Palace's hands is related to the True Dragon Lair in the land of apoplexy. However, it is only an incomplete map. If we want to seize the fortune in it, it is far from enough to rely on the strength of Sun Moon Palace. So, I would like to invite you to join us. Mi Hungjin was very frank and didn't hide anything. Of course, there are great risks in this. As far as I know, Sun Moon Palace is not the only force that knows about the True Dragon Lair. This also means that if we want to seize the fortune, we will inevitably have conflicts with other peerless figures. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but be surprised. Does the True Dragon Lair really exist? Mi Hungjin said, through analysis of various clues, it should be true, but it's hard to say. After all, that place has always been sealed, and no one has really entered it since ancient times. Lin Sun couldn't help but hesitate for a moment. Mi Hungjin said with a smile, "You don't have to rush to agree or not. Brother Lin can think about it first and then make a decision. The only thing I can tell you is that if you can seize the fortune in the True Dragon Lair, it is very likely that you can set foot in the realm of Peerless King." Lin Sun was shocked and finally moved. "If Brother Lin has made up your mind, just crush this Taoist talisman, and I will contact you as soon as possible." Mi Hungjin handed over a Taoist talisman inscribed with the pattern of the sun and the moon. Lin Sun said happily, "Okay." That night, Mi Hungjin and Chi Chongdo left Thousand Streams Spirit Mountain together, and other practitioners also left one after another. Lin Sun, Old Toad, and Alu also left at the same time. They decided to go to Mabai province to see if they could contact Zhao Jingxian of the Holy Land of Spirit Treasure. They planned to invite Zhao Jingxian to act together after the domain of absolute nothingness arrived. Now Lin Sun was clear that all practitioners under the King Realm had the opportunity to enter the domain of absolute nothingness, which also meant that an heir of an ancient orthodoxy like Mi Hongjin was destined to act alone. Old Toad, do you know anything about the True Dragon Lair? On the way to Mabai province at night, Lin Sun told Old Toad and Alu about Mi Hongjin's invitation to explore the True Dragon Lair together. Old Toad raised his eyebrows and said, "They are really bold to set their sights on that place. Don't they know that in ancient times, countless peerless figures tried to force their way in and died there?" After that, he changed the topic and rubbed his palms together as he said, "However, the world this time is unlike the past. It's very likely that the seal on the True Dragon's Den will collapse on its own. If we're able to enter it and investigate, then it'll be an extremely rare opportunity." Lin Sun frowned and asked, "Isn't it dangerous?" "Dangerous, extremely dangerous," Old Toad said seriously, "but riches come with risks. Who doesn't want to take risks to seize good fortune? So, you suggest we go?" Lin Sun was a little tempted. Old Toad pondered hard for a long time, but finally shook his head and said, "Don't make a decision yet. You need to think about it more. You don't know that the True Dragon Lair is in the upper 9 realms of the domain of absolute nothingness. Although there are heaven-defying fortunes hidden there, they are also accompanied by heaven-defying death tribulations. There are so many fortunes in the domain of absolute nothingness. It's not necessary to risk one's life there." Lin Sun asked in surprise, "Have you ever entered the domain of absolute nothingness?" Old Toad sighed faintly, put his hands behind his back, and looked up at the sky with the vicissitudes of an experienced man. He said, "Now that things have come to this, I won't hide it from you. In ancient times, the domain of absolute nothingness was marked with my footprints. I'm afraid not many people remember such a glorious deed now." Lin Sun and Alu rolled their eyes in unison. This toad began to blow its own trumpet again. "What's with your expressions?" Seeing this, Old Toad couldn't help feeling ashamed and annoyed. "I'm not afraid to tell you that if you listen to me in this trip to the domain of absolute nothingness, you can seize good fortune as easily as drinking tea and eating rice. Otherwise, with your shallow knowledge, you won't even get to drink soup, let alone seize good fortune." "Bullshit." Alu looked contemptuous. "Please go on." Lin Sun sneered with his arms crossed. Chapter 1138. 3,000 realms represent the 3,000 regions in the ultimate domain. Every region has its own creation and creation, but only the top 10 in each region are qualified to enter the upper 9 realms. Do you know that? Old Toad spat everywhere. In order to wash away the humiliation and attack Lin Sun and Alu's contemptuous attitude, it didn't hide anything anymore and told them everything it knew. Only those who enter the upper 9 realms have the chance to enter the Tianjiao Golden List. Do you know that? You don't know, right? Let me tell you, only in the upper 9 realms there are real fortunes sealed. Do you understand? You don't understand, right? Then do you know how dangerous it is in the upper 9 realms, which is regarded as the blood refinement of the ultimate domain? You don't understand, right? Look at your ignorant faces. What's the difference between you and ignorant frogs in a well? The more Old Toad spoke, the more impassioned it became, as if it was full of vigor. Lin Sun and Alu were silent. Although Old Toad's attitude was a little arrogant, what it said was true. So, ignorance isn't a mistake. The mistake is that you don't know how ignorant you are. Seeing this, Old Toad became more proud, and its spit almost sprayed on their faces. "Brother, what do you think?" Alu was a little diffident and was shocked by Old Toad's momentum. Lin Sun's answer was very simple. He slapped the back of Old Toad's head and scolded, "Since you know so much, why didn't you say it before? If you had said it earlier, would we have treated you like this?" Old Toad staggered and covered the back of its head with its hand. It was so angry that black lines appeared on its forehead. You can hit people at will because you're ignorant. Seeing Lin Sun's unkind look, Old Toad quickly changed the topic. Okay. I promise to be a guiding light for you when you enter the ultimate domain. Is that okay? Alu laughed. Just lead the way. Why are you bragging about being a guiding light? You Toad, will you die if you don't brag about yourself? I'll kill you, barbarian. Old Toad was so angry that it pounced on Alu with a howl. The two enemies started fighting again. Lin Sun, on the other hand, secretly decided that he would find some time to teach Old Toad a lesson. Old Toad was obviously hiding a lot of things, but it was always so secretive. It was simply too dishonest. I don't know if Jing Xian will agree to act with me. Suddenly, Lin Sun thought of Zhao Jingxian, who was far away in the spiritual treasure Holy Land, and fell into deep thought. The cold moon hung high in the night sky like a hook. Numerous ravines crisscrossed the ground while sword chi whistled through the heavens and the earth, and it added a wisp of murderous intent to the veil of night. Croak! A crow flapped its wings and flew over from afar. However, as soon as its body approached this expanse of the heavens and the earth, it was minced into pieces by a strand of sword chi that remained in the air, and it transformed into a bloody mist with a pu sound. On the ground, Shi Jintong's body was trembling. It was as if he had used up all his strength to lift his head with difficulty. When their gazes landed on the figure whose clothes were whiter than snow, their expressions couldn't help but reveal a wisp of deep fear and bewilderment. How could this person be so powerful? Shi Jintong was an ancient freak of the Shi Tuo lineage. Not long ago, he had appeared out of nowhere and defeated 19 contemporary figures in 3 days, establishing an illustrious reputation and shocking the world. He was gifted with extraordinary strength and cultivated the mountain-moving scripture of the Shi Tuo lineage. Among the ancient freaks, he was also a fierce character. But today he had been defeated. He had been defeated by 3 swords. In other words, he couldn't even block 3 swords before he was completely suppressed. At this time, there were 3 sword scars on Shi Jintong's body. One was on his chest, extending from his neck to his navel. The wound was 1 inch long, and his skin and flesh were lacerated, dripping with blood. The other was on his back, and it was a horizontal cut. It was 1 inch deep, and there was no difference. The most shocking thing was that the last sword scar was on his throat, and it was still only 1 inch long. This was a sword scar caused by a single stab. If it went deeper, it would definitely be able to slit his throat. It seemed that these injuries weren't serious, but they had brought an extremely heavy blow to Shi Jintong, almost causing his Taoist heart to collapse. Because he knew too well that if the other party wanted to kill him, it would only take 1 sword strike to kill him. Because of this, he felt so helpless and fearful. As an ancient freak, Shi Jintong never thought that someone of the same level as him would be so terrifying. I have lost. Shi Jintong was dejected. His confidence was crushed, and his will to fight was gone. He knew that this defeat had left an unerasable shadow in his heart. Then, he stood up and staggered toward the distance. His silhouette was bleak, and his eyes were filled with confusion. How could this Yin Qingbai be so terrifying? If other cultivators saw this, they wouldn't be able to imagine that this was an ancient freak who had recently become famous. The cold moon was like a bowstring, and it was as sharp as a hook. It sprinkled down cold light. As he watched his opponent leave, Yin Qingbai sighed softly. It was as if he didn't have enough fun. Or perhaps he felt a little bored. He raised his hand, and the ancient sword in his hand flew out. A handsome sword boy with red lips, white teeth appeared. He received the ancient sword with both hands, and then he carefully hid it in the sword case on his back. After that, the sword boy said, "Congratulations, young master. You've defeated an ancient freak today. You're the first genius of this generation to suppress an ancient freak in recent times." His voice was clear, and it was filled with respect and worship. Don't say such words in the future. There's nothing worth congratulating about defeating a weak opponent. Yin Qingbai's voice was flat. He placed his hands behind his back, and his white clothes fluttered as he turned around and walked towards a distance. The sword boy felt even more reverence towards Yun Qingbai when he saw this. He faintly felt that perhaps this was the loneliness of experts. The young master was already standing at the peak, yet there were only a few who could match him. A master and a servant appeared in a city early in the morning. "Who's your next opponent?" asked Yun Qingbai, an ancient freak from the Cloud Source Sword sect. His name is... Before the sword boy could finish speaking, Yun Qingbai interrupted him. "There's no need to say anything else. Just tell me where he is now." "Jade Worm Gorge." The sword boy hurriedly reported the location. Yun Qingbai nodded. He had been in closed-door cultivation for 10 years. Now that he came out, many cultivators in the world thought that he was no longer the invincible existence under the king's realm 10 years ago. Some people even thought that he was not enough to compare with some ancient freaks. Yun Qingbai did not refute. Instead, he directly entered the world, intending to choose some ancient freaks to test his sword. Unknowingly, they had come to the center of the city, where a message tree stood. Although it was early in the morning, the place was already full of cultivators. It's really a piece of shocking news. As soon as Demon Lin appeared, he suppressed Jin Xiaoming and forced him to flee. It's really satisfying. Jin Xiaoming was an ancient freak, but he couldn't even keep his avatar. He was cooked into a pot of snake soup by Demon Lin. What a miserable end. Who would have thought that the first one to suppress an ancient freak would be Demon Lin? The crowd was in an uproar and kept talking about it. Yun Qingbai stamped his feet and looked at the message tree with a calm expression. There was the latest news, which recorded that Lin Sun defeated Jin Xiaoming at the gathering of Qianlu. Damn it! Next to him, the sword boy was angry. In his opinion, Yun Qingbai should be the first one to suppress an ancient freak, but now the limelight was stolen by Demon Lin, which made him a little unacceptable for a while. Yun Qingbai suddenly said, "Do you remember what I said?" The sword boy was stunned, and then suddenly came to his senses. He nodded and said, "Yes, you said that no matter who Lin Sun was, I should kill him to wash away the shame of our sect." Yun Qingbai nodded. "Now that he has appeared, help me keep an eye out for him." The sword boy suddenly cheered up and realized that his master was going to kill Lin Sun. "Yuan Zhuang, this guy finally appeared." Suddenly, an ice-cold voice sounded nearby. Yun Qingbai looked up and saw that the one who spoke was a young man in a brocade robe. He had sword-like eyebrows and starry eyes, and was extraordinarily handsome. He stood there proudly like a crane in a flock of chickens. However, at this moment, the young man's eyebrows were full of killing intent, and his whole body exuded a violent aura. Outsiders might not see anything, but Yun Qingbai instantly realized that this young man was very unusual. "What are you looking at?" Suddenly, the young man in brocade robe turned his head. His eyes were as bright as a pair of peerless blades. He glanced at Yun Qingbai as if he was going to devour him. The sword boy's face darkened. When did someone in the world dare to talk to his master like this? He was simply courting death. However, before the sword boy could speak, Yun Qingbai had retracted his gaze and said, "Let's go." As he spoke, he turned around and left. The sword boy was stunned, as if he couldn't believe it. He wondered why his master could restrain himself, but in the end, he didn't dare to ask. He just took a look at the young man in brocade robe and firmly remembered his appearance. Then he turned around and left with Yun Qingbai. The young man in brocade robe was also stunned, and then he snorted coldly. "Young master, if you meet the man in white in the land of despair in the future, you should retreat as much as possible. If you're destined to be his enemy, you should go all out and never hold back." A cyan-clothed old ape appeared beside him, and his voice was low and weathered. "Why?" The young man in brocade robe frowned. "This man has already established himself in the land of despair. He is like a sword with hidden edge. He is too big a threat." The cyan-clothed old ape had a deep gaze as he reminded. The reason he left was none other than because he noticed that this old servant was by his side, and he wasn't afraid of battle. The young man in brocade robe frowned while his expression flickered indeterminately. He recovered his calm after a long time, and then he looked at the message tree in the distance and said, "Let's not talk about him. Yuan Zhuang, you've seen it as well. That fellow called Lin Sun has appeared." The cyan-clothed old ape nodded, and then he sighed with emotion. All those years ago on the Five-Element Saint Island, I'd already noticed that this kid was extraordinary, but I never expected that he would actually possess such extraordinary attainments in the path of despair now. The younger generation really is formidable. Chapter 1139. The green-clothed old ape said, "Little young master, you're wrong. My clan's inherited Tao scripture was comprehended by this child himself. I merely gave him a chance." The youth in embroidered robes was stunned. Why are you doing this?" The green-clothed old ape had a secretive look on his face as he said, "I'm sowing good karma for the young master." Good karma? The young man in embroidered robes almost thought that his ears were playing tricks on him, and he laughed with ridicule. "With the resources and reserves of my clan, is there a need to do this? I don't care about all that. All I know is that this kid once seized something from me, and this enmity must be avenged." The green-clothed old ape sighed and asked, "If that's the case, can you promise me something, young master? Go ahead." Although the youth in embroidered robes was arrogant and unruly, he respected the green-clothed old ape very much. "If you wish to make him your enemy, please show mercy." The green-clothed old ape had a rare, solemn expression on his face. The young man was extremely displeased when he heard this, and his expression turned gloomy. However, in the end, he gritted his teeth and said, "All right, I promise you that I, Yuan Fatian, won't beat him to death when I take revenge in the future." The green-clothed old ape furrowed his brows imperceptibly. He looked at the arrogant and conceited young man in front of him and said nothing more. He mentioned another thing. In less than half a month, the divine sacrifice altar will arrive in the world. There are 3,000 of them in different areas of the ancient desolation realm. We should prepare in advance. The young man in embroidered robes who called himself Yuan Fatian was shocked in his heart. He knew that the divine sacrifice Tao altar was the node of the passageway to enter the region of absolute apex. "Young master, why did you tolerate it before?" The sword boy couldn't help but ask. That young man in brocade robe is nothing to be afraid of, but is a saint by his side. If we make a move, the consequences will be unpredictable. As soon as these words were spoken by Yun Qingbai, the sword boy's entire body stiffened, and he was shocked to the point he almost bit his tongue. Exactly who is this fellow? He actually has a saint protecting him? The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. Sacred and inviolable, this was not something that could be casually said. "Do you think sages are scary?" Yun Qingbai suddenly asked. The sword boy nodded subconsciously. Yun Qingbai laughed and said, "You only know that holiness is inviolable, but you don't know that there are times when holiness can be reduced to grass." After he finished speaking, he didn't say anything else. His white clothes fluttered in the wind, and his figure was proud and aloof as he walked towards the distance. The sword boy was startled at first, then shocked, and finally sucked in a breath of cold air. In the young master's eyes, even the divine was nothing to fear. Mabai Prefecture. Lin Sun and Alu were drinking in a restaurant. Not long after, the travel-worn old toad appeared. Carrying a wine jug, it took a gulp before it said gloomily, "There's no way to contact that chick Zhao Jingxian at all. I spent a lot of effort to find out that she's in seclusion, saying that she's preparing to enter the apex domain." Lin Sun was a little disappointed. Originally, he had hoped to invite Zhao Jingxian to join him, but now it seemed that it was obviously impossible. "Let's go. In any case, we'll still have a chance to meet after entering the apex domain," said Old Toad. "Leave? Where are we going?" Alu was stunned. Old Toad smiled mysteriously and said, "To grab the safest passage to enter the apex domain. Well, if I remember correctly, it seems to be not far from Sunset Tang Valley." On the same day, Lin Sun and his party left Mabai Prefecture. Led by Old Toad, they traveled through the vast mountains, rivers, and cities without stopping along the way. 3 days later, in a desolate and primitive mountain range, Old Toad suddenly looked up and said, The speed at which the world is changing is getting faster and faster. There's more spiritual energy between the mountains than in ancient times. Lin Sun and Alu also nodded. In these days, they walked through the vast mountains, rivers, swamps, and deserts, and saw all kinds of shocking changes along the way. In some wastelands, huge gullies and abysses suddenly split open, and strange black mist rose into the sky, making the day seem to fall into the night. In some mountains, thunderstorms and lightning suddenly appeared, covering an area of thousands of miles. The dazzling thunderstorm was like a great catastrophe, frightening the universe. Even some areas were completely torn apart by the violent spiritual energy, turning into space turbulence, which was daunting to look at. At the same time, the speed of the transformation of all things in the world was also accelerating. Lin Sun and his party once saw with their own eyes that a barren and withered mountain glowed with surging vitality in just 30 minutes. Surrounded by clouds and vegetation, it turned into a spiritual mountain at a speed visible to the naked eye. This was a shocking change that affected the entire ancient desolation domain. And along with the shocking change, there was also a terrible massacre. The spiritual energy in the world was getting stronger and stronger, and the number of spiritual mountains was increasing day by day. Some spiritual medicines, rare treasures, and magic materials that had long been annihilated in the long river of time appeared in different areas of the ancient desolation domain like bamboo shoots after a rain. Spiritual mountains could be built as blessed lands, and they could be used as the mountain gate to establish a sect. On the other hand, first-rate treasures like spirit herbs, precious treasures, and divine materials were extremely precious cultivation resources. Now, with the acceleration of the change of the world, not only the cultivators in the world, but also the major ancient orthodoxies could not sit still. They began to seize and occupy these ownerless spiritual mountains and treasures. Cultivators fought and killed in order to compete for treasures. And the ancient orthodoxies had conflicts in order to expand their territories and occupy cultivation resources, which led to a war of power. Along the way, Lin Sun and his party saw such a scene of bloody conflicts and wind and rain everywhere. The whole world began to be filled with the smell of gunpowder and conflict. It was no longer as peaceful as before. All of this was caused by the change of the world. The great world is a chaotic world. The existing order and pattern of the ancient desolation domain are destined to be broken and reshuffled. Old Toad sighed. The world is bound to enter turbulence and unrest. Destruction and rise coexist. It will be an unprecedentedly brilliant world. The great world has not really come, but it has already caused great disturbances and chaos. I can't imagine what it will be like when the real great world comes. Old Toad sighed with emotion. Alu sighed with emotion as well. Obviously, what he'd seen and heard in the past few days had greatly affected him. What else can it be? Of course, it will be the coexistence of the most brilliant world and the bloody and turbulent world. Only the real strong can rise in the flames of war and smoke and lead the great world. Old Toad said proudly and heroically, "Of course, whoever wants to lead the world will have to ask this king if he agrees or not." The first half of what he said was very reliable, but the second half of what he said immediately exposed his boastful side. This caused Alu to roll his eyes and spit at him fiercely. Lin Sun was about to say something, but his eyes suddenly narrowed. In a place far away, there were vast mountains and peaks, but there was a strange tree which was taller than these mountains. Its canopy rose to the sky like an umbrella. Its branches were twisted like a dragon, and its leaves were as big as the clouds in the sky. They were as red as the sunset, as if they were burning. Even the nearby mountains couldn't block its trunk. Damn it, this is a red cloud divine wood. It was extremely rare in ancient times. Old Toad shouted in surprise. Oh my, it's still growing. Alu's eyes widened. In the mountains, the branches and leaves of the red cloud divine tree were swaying, and its trunk was like a soaring dragon, rising high and rising, as if it was going to tear the sky and rush out of Zhou Su. Lin Sun was keenly aware that the tree seemed to be psychic and had life. It was transforming to the extreme and extending its own life. Boom! However, when the red cloud divine tree was about to break through the sky, suddenly, a thick and dazzling lightning struck down. That was divine punishment. In the blink of an eye, the crimson cloud divine tree was heavily injured. Its branches were broken and turned into ashes by the lightning. Even its trunk, which was taller than a group of mountains, was charred black and shook violently in the tribulation lightning. Looking from a distance, it was like a peerless strong man encountered a great disaster, and it was hard to predict whether he would survive or not. Crack! In the end, the red cloud divine tree failed to pass the tribulation, and its trunk was split in half by a sharp thunderbolt. Strangely, half of the broken trunk was withered and scorched black, while the other half was covered with an incomparable vitality in the tribulation, shining brightly. Withering and flourishing, the wonderful cycle of life and death. Unfortunately, it was only one step away from passing the tribulation successfully and becoming a king. Lin Sun sighed in his heart. What are you waiting for? Hurry up. This is the Thunder Divine Tree, which gives birth to a wisp of vitality in destruction. It's priceless. Old Toad's eyes were red, and its breathing was heavy. It rushed over with a swish. Lin Sun and Alu also hurried to follow. This was a canyon where the Red Cloud Divine Tree was originally rooted. But now, the canyon had long been destroyed by the tribulation, and the ground was scorched black. Most of the trunk and branches of the Red Cloud Divine Tree had turned into ashes in the tribulation, and only some scattered branches and leaves were scattered on the ground. When Lin Sun and Alu arrived, they saw at a glance that in the ashes on the ground, there was a shining trunk of the divine tree. It was only 1 foot long and as thick as a child's arm, but it was bright red like fire, bright and clean, and filled with a surging vitality. The death chi has disappeared, leaving only a piece of pure origin that was born in the tribulation. Even a sage would be jealous of this thing. Old Toad's saliva almost flowed out. As a 3-legged golden toad, he could recognize all things in the world and was knowledgeable about ancient and modern treasures. Naturally, he could see the value of this thing at a glance. It was absolutely big enough to shock the world. However, just when he was about to take action, he was firmly held down by Lin Sun, who transmitted his voice to him, "Be careful." Old Toad was stunned. It was also at this moment that the fiery red trunk of the divine tree suddenly lit up with dazzling divine radiance, and then it gradually transformed into a young woman as the rays of light flowed through it. She had bright eyes, white teeth, and a sweet smile. Her soft, fiery red hair was coiled up by a branch, and her delicate and slender body was wrapped up by a huge fiery red leaf, revealing a section of her tender and translucent calves and snow-white bare feet. She looked only 15 or 16 years old, youthful and bright. Her snow-white skin was filled with wisps of fire, and there was a strange fire pattern between her eyebrows. Chapter 1140. It was already shocking enough for a divine tree of red clouds to appear in the wilderness and tear apart the sky to undergo a heavenly tribulation. Yet now, a piece of divine lightning struck, wood that had transformed into an origin of life in the midst of destruction had actually transformed into a young girl. This was even more astounding. Very strange. Alarmed, Alu suddenly shouted, "Hey, where are you from?" Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes and became vigilant. This girl looked delicate and charming, smiling and extremely youthful and sweet, but her aura was very unusual. Just then, Old Toad straightened his clothes, coughed dryly, and said with a smile, "Miss, what are you doing here? Aren't you afraid of being abducted in the wilderness?" Dressed in a green robe, he had a handsome and devilishly charming face. Any ordinary girl would have been head over heels for him, but the fiery-haired girl's eyes shone brightly as she bit her teeth and giggled. "You're so handsome, but you want to abduct me. Do you want to play some shameful things with me?" Her skin was snow-white and her breath smelled like orchids. Her sweet smile carried a different kind of allure. Old Toad's eyes widened. So direct. Is this really okay, miss? The fiery-haired girl said angrily. Brother, are you lustful but not daring? Old Toad's eyes rolled around. He likes men. Alu interrupted in a low, muffled voice. The fiery-haired girl was stunned. Old Toad almost went crazy. He wanted nothing more than to kick this barbarian Alu to death. He hurriedly explained, Miss, don't misunderstand. I'm very interested in you. Heaven and earth can bear witness to this. The sun and the moon can bear witness to this. The fiery-haired young woman chuckled, and it was bright and beautiful like the morning sun. She said, All right, do you think I don't know what you're thinking? You just want to capture me and eat me like a divine material, right? Old Toad was stunned and realized that this girl wasn't so easy to fool. He raised his thumb and said, Miss, you have sharp eye. What do you think? Are all descendants of the three-legged golden toad so shameless? The fiery-haired girl wasn't annoyed. She looked at Old Toad with interest, her clear eyes flashing. What do you mean shameless? Little sister, you can't talk nonsense. Old Toad's face darkened, and he was a little astonished. This girl was incredible. She could actually see through his background. Then I might as well tell you. Not everyone can bear the consequences of trying to hit on me, the fiery-haired girl said with a smile. Whoosh! Before he could finish speaking, a wisp of flame, like a nimble snake, abruptly shot out from under Old Toad's feet. Startled, Old Toad hurriedly jumped away and slapped its palm. But unexpectedly, the strand of flame actually transformed into a flaming dragon, and its body suddenly expanded explosively. Its body that was thick like a winding mountain ridge surged with a monstrous flaming glow, and it filled this expanse of space. Startled, Old Toad was about to counterattack with all its might. Right at this moment, the enormous fire dragon turned into a rain of fire that filled the sky and dissipated. At the same time, the fiery-haired girl's bell-like laughter rang out. I'm just teasing you. Do you really plan to fight me? Little sister, you're really naughty. Old Toad's face was cloudy, and his teeth itched with hatred. He had actually been startled by this girl, which made him lose face a little, and he looked at the fiery-haired girl with unkind eyes. The fiery-haired girl stood there charmingly, pursing her lips and smiling, but she looked at Lin Sun and suddenly said, My name is Chi Yao. Today, with the help of the changes in heaven and earth, I was lucky enough to break the shackles that had bound me for many years and finally awakened. I didn't expect to disturb you three little brothers. I'm really sorry. Lin Sun's heart shook at these words. It turned out that the divine tree of scarlet clouds just now hadn't been going through a tribulation, but had used the power of thunder and lightning to break the shackles and awaken Chi Yao from her silence. There was no doubt that they had all misunderstood before. This bright and beautiful young girl was actually an ancient freak who had been silent for countless years. Take medicine. Good name. Old Toad laughed, obviously still brooding over the experience just now. Chi Yao rolled her eyes and said, You're the one who should be taking your medicine. No need to apologize, miss. We were a little rude just now. Now that the misunderstanding has been cleared up, we'll leave. Lin Sun cupped his hands and was about to leave with Old Toad and Alu. Can you three little brothers take me with you? Who would have thought that Chi Yao would also catch up with them? And when she moved, there was the sound of clanking chains. Only then did Lin Sun and the others see that a strange black chain was shackled around her snow-white ankle, which was surrounded by a heart-palpitating aura of death. When she stood still, the chain was invisible and undetectable, but once she moved, it was immediately revealed. Noticing their gazes, Chi Yao said casually, It's just a natural shackle. When I become a king, I can tear it off. Who are you? In my opinion, you don't look like a spiritual body formed by the divine tree of scarlet clouds at all. Old Toad frowned, his golden eyes looking at Chi Yao up and down. Chi Yao was very frank and said crisply, I'm not a spiritual body. I was just sealed in this divine tree of scarlet clouds by my ancestors. With the power of withering, I resisted the erosion of time, and at the same time, I was also comprehending the way of withering. This chain was also left by your ancestors? Old Toad stared at the chain on her ankle, and the more he looked, the more frightened he became. The aura of death on the chain was so terrible that it turned into a strange and twisted Taoist pattern and was branded on it. This wasn't something that an ordinary person could achieve. Even in the sage realm, only an existence who had stepped into the great sage realm would be able to achieve this. Yes, Qi Yao nodded. But in the end, Lin Sun still refused to let Qi Yao go with him. This surprised Qi Yao. After watching Lin Sun and the others leave, the smile on her delicate and bright face suddenly disappeared, and there was a sense of coldness and indifference. One is a royal descendant of the three-legged golden toad, one has the aura of the dragon elephant emperor, and the other, when thinking of Lin Sun, Qi Yao's delicate eyebrows gradually wrinkled. A descendant of the true dragon? No, he is obviously a human and a pure blood, but why does he have the aura of the true dragon? After thinking for a long time, she finally couldn't speculate anything. No matter what, this guy must have a piece of Bodhiwood on him. And it must be a Bodhiwood that has been bombarded by the power of cutting Tao, Qi Yao murmured, and her clear eyes couldn't help but be filled with a trace of heat. Then, this trace of heat was carefully concealed by her. Little girl, did you see the shocking change that just happened here? In the distance, a group of cultivators swept over like a dark cloud. Obviously, the thunder retribution caused by the divine tree of scarlet clouds was so shocking that it attracted the attention of these cultivators, and they all rushed over. Qi Yao seemed to be unaware of this, and she was thinking about something. That guy is definitely going to enter the absolute summit domain. Since that's the case, there's a chance to get in touch with him. While thinking, she strode into the distance with a pair of white and sparkling bare feet. These cultivators were stunned. They were actually ignored by a little girl, which made them feel ashamed. Stop! Didn't you hear us asking you a question? A cultivator rushed up. Boom! But before he could even approach, this reincarnation evolution realm expert's entire body was incinerated by an expanse of blazing divine flames that suddenly appeared. In an instant, he transformed into ash that dispersed into the surroundings. It was like he'd evaporated into thin air, and not even his corpse was left behind. On the other hand, Qi Yao still seemed as if she hadn't noticed at all, and she just walked forward by herself. As she walked through the mountains and rivers, her fiery red, long hair fluttered, and she seemed like a celestial that had walked out from the flames. All the cultivators present here were dumbstruck, and their entire bodies felt cold. Who's that young girl? How could she be so strange and terrifying? Swoosh! The vast universe arc traversed through space. The heavens and the earth had undergone a great change, and dangers had occurred repeatedly along the way. It was even to the extent that battles between old fellows at the King Realm had erupted, causing Lin Sun to be unable to care about anything else and choose to travel on the vast universe Arkansas. Your right to refuse. That little girl's entire body is strange. She seems to be charming and moving, and she's pure like a fledgling that's just left the thatched cottage. But she's actually not simple at all. On the treasured ship, Old Toad had a rare, serious expression on his face. Cultivating in silence with the help of the Red Cloud Divine Tree isn't something that an ordinary person can do. Now that she's come into the world, she's even more amazing that she's using thunder retribution to break the shackles. After a pause, he continued, more importantly, the chain that binds her ankles should be an extremely terrifying holy treasure with a very powerful background. Alu said in surprise, I thought you'd been charmed by her. Old Toad said grumpily, I'm not that bored. She's very unusual. Lin Sun sighed with emotion. This was the first time he'd seen how an ancient freak came into the world. That scene was indeed too amazing, and he was also greatly moved. And how many ancient freaks like Qi Yao were there? He was afraid that no one knew, but there was no doubt that there would be many. 5 days later, Lin Sun and the others arrived at an ancient battlefield. There were still traces of war in this place. There were ruins and ruins everywhere, and it was a scene of desolation. On the ground, one could occasionally see decaying bones and broken armors and weapons. The chilly wind was roaring, and the world was gloomy. Occasionally, thunder and lightning tore through the void, sprinkling glaring and horrifying white light. If I remember correctly, after passing this battlefield, less than 10,000 miles ahead is Sunset Tang Valley, where the Golden Crow lineage is entrenched. As early as ancient times, it was regarded as a sacred place. But I'm extremely disgusted with the Golden Crow lineage. I don't know if those Golden Crows are all dead now. Old Toad took Lin Sun and Alu to the depths of the ancient battlefield. He seemed to be very familiar with this place. Lin Sun remembered what bloodthirsty Queen Zhao Xingye had said in the bloodthirsty battlefield. The insignificant spiritual bow itself was an extremely terrible holy treasure. If its spirit could be found, it would be enough to restore the bow's former power. According to Zhao Xingye's judgment, the clue to find the spirit of insignificance Bao was probably hidden in Sunset Tang Valley. Old Toad, have you ever been to Sunset Tang Valley? Lin Sun asked. Old Toad shook his head. That's the territory of the Golden Crow lineage. In ancient times, this clan was famous for its cruelty and insidiousness. Besides, there are many horrible old things in their clan. Who dares to go there rashly? As soon as he finished speaking, the distant, gloomy sky suddenly shone brightly, like a golden sun rising and moving fast. Chapter 1141. The Golden Crow soared across the sky. Its body that seemed to be made of gold shone brightly. When it flapped its cloud-like wings, it fanned out raging flames that incinerated the void and illuminated the mountains and rivers. From a distance, it looked like a big sun moving horizontally. Boom! Some flames fell on the earth, melting the earth and riddling it with astonishing destructive power. The Golden Crow lived on the Fusong tree and boasted of being the descendant of the sun god. It was one of the strongest fierce birds in ancient times with extremely terrifying combat power. The Golden Crow in the distance flew across the sky and disappeared in the distance in the blink of an eye. Damn, these Golden Crows didn't die out. It seems that their descendants may also enter the absolute summit domain. Old Toad's expression flickered. There were 3,000 realms in the absolute summit domain. Each realm was like a large and boundless area, and each area had a special passage to enter. This passageway was the sacred sacrifice Tao altar. This also meant that entering from different divine sacrifice altar would arrive at different areas of the absolute summit domain and be separated from each other. The path that Old Toad chose this time was located in this ancient battlefield. Except for Sunset Tang Valley, there were not many Orthodox forces nearby, so it should be regarded as a quite safe path. But now, Old Toad was a little uncertain. If the Golden Crow lineage that lived in Sunset Tang Valley also got involved, even if they could enter the absolute summit domain, they would enter the same area, and the conflict was bound to be inevitable. The struggle of the great world, the struggle of the absolute summit, all lies in the word struggle. As long as you enter the absolute summit domain, why should you be afraid of competing with others? Lin Sun patted Old Toad on the shoulder. It was impossible for those above the King Realm to enter the absolute summit domain, which was enough. As long as it was a competition of the same generation, Lin Sun was not afraid of anyone. The ancient battlefield was vast and boundless. The deeper they went, the darker the sky and the earth were full of war ruins and broken walls. In the process of moving forward, Lin Sun and the others saw some people one after another. There was no doubt that these people also came to wait for the arrival of the divine sacrifice altar. Roar! Suddenly, a fierce beast's roar sounded like thunder, resounding in the ancient battlefield and breaking the dead silence of this world. Lin Sun and the others immediately saw a group of people coming from afar. Many of them were riding ferocious beasts. Some were like Chilants, some were soul-devouring beasts, and some were bloodbaths. All of them surged with auras and possessed astonishing might. Lin Sun and the others slowed down and paid attention all along the way, and they noticed that along with the passage of time, they saw more and more cultivators. Almost all of them appeared in groups. Moreover, They all looked like disciples from different orthodoxies. Alu couldn't help but mutter, "Old Toad, didn't you say that very few people know about the divine sacrifice altar that's about to descend here?" All along the way, they'd seen over 1,000 cultivators. How would I know? Old Toad was also speechless. His experience came from ancient times, but it was very clear that a lot had changed with the passage of countless years. Get lost. The void behind him trembled as a thunderous roar resounded. A blood-colored fortress ship pressed down on the clouds. The ship was extremely large and blood-red, overflowing with frightening Taoist patterns. In front of the treasure ship, there were many ancient beasts pulling it together. Each of them was rare in the world, like the 8-clawed fire dragon. Its whole body was fiery red, and its fierce power was monstrous, looking down on the mountains and rivers. There was the sky-splitting thunder roar, which trampled and shattered the void as it ran. There was also the black-tailed heavenly sparrow, which could summon wind and rain. There was also the multicolored winged serpent, which was as big as a python dragon, which was the descendant of the ancient dream dragon. The blood-colored ship and many ancient beasts crushed across the sky, whistling through the universe. The terrible power oppressed the sky and made the ancient battlefield tremble. On the big ship, a man in ancient clothes with a high crown put his hands behind his back, with a green flute at his waist. His figure was aloof and arrogant, and his eyes shone brighter than the sun when he opened and closed them. There was also a group of men and women around him, all of whom had extraordinary appearances. Boom! Lin Sun and the others were in front of them, but neither the group of ancient beasts nor the people on the blood-colored ship showed any signs of stopping. Both Old Toad and Alu were furious, but Lin Sun held them down firmly and dodged to one side to make way for them. This area of space was in chaos. The blood-colored ship crushed past, not stopping. It rumbled into the distance like rushing thunder, leaving behind a wave of energy that spread outwards. Vaguely, some sneers and disdainful voices could be heard, as if they were commenting on Lin Sun and the others with a sense of ridicule. Old Toad and Alu were annoyed and looked terrible. The group of people just now clearly did it on purpose. The void was so big, but they just wanted to run amok around them, which was too much. A chill flashed between Lin Sun's eyebrows. What was domineering and rampant? That was it. In the struggle for the Great Way, one step back will lead to another step back. Everyone, your minds have been frightened. You better go back. The Great Way of the King is destined to have no fate with you. At this moment, a handsome gray-haired man with a beast-bone longbow on his back passed by and casually commented with a trace of contempt. He took a step forward, and the light under his feet was like a lotus leaf, carrying him forward quickly. In the blink of an eye, he was already far away. After that, an azure-scale heavenly eagle flashed through the sky, and it carried a woman with a smooth forehead. She said coldly, "If you insist on moving forward, then be prepared to be a stepping stone." Even though everyone beneath the king realm has the opportunity to enter the apex region, some are able to become kings, and some are bound to be buried in the ground for others to step on. Old Toad and Alu's faces were extremely gloomy. They were just giving way, but they were regarded as cowards, which was annoying. You don't have to be discouraged by this. On the blood-colored ship, just now, are the practitioners of the ancient beast's spiritual mountain. Their style is the most violent and domineering. A young man with gray wings on his back approached and kindly reminded them. Judging from his appearance, he was obviously a descendant of the Wind-Talking clan. When he saw Lin Sun's appearance from the front, he was stunned and cried out involuntarily, "Demon Lin!" Obviously, he knew Lin Sun. The young man broke into a cold sweat when he thought of how he had just reminded Lin Sun not to be discouraged. He hurriedly apologized. "I didn't know it was Child Lin just now. Please don't take offense to my words of warning." Lin Sun wouldn't care about him. He waved his hand and let him go. Beast's spiritual mountain? I'll remember it. At this time, Old Toad gnashed his teeth and spoke. He had been holding back his anger. Being scolded to get out of the way already made him extremely angry. Now he was ridiculed one after another, which was like adding oil to the fire, making him seething with anger. And the boy with the longbow on his back and the woman riding the eagle, I'll remember them too. Damn it! How dare they regard us as stepping stones? I'll trample them to the ground with my feet. Alu said in a low, muffled voice, and all the joints of his body were crackling. Lin Sun smiled slightly, his black eyes clear. He didn't say anything more, nor did he delay any longer, and continued to move forward. Half a day later, on the ancient battlefield ahead, an incomparably magnificent city appeared. It was magnificent and lay across the universe, as if it had been standing since the beginning of time, and it was suffused with an immortal aura of vicissitudes. At this time, countless cultivators had gathered there and stopped moving forward. All of them were looking at and sizing up the huge city from afar. This city was very ancient, and its walls were mottled with bloodstains. It was located in the ancient battlefield, yet it had never suffered any damage or destruction throughout the countless years, and it seemed extremely mysterious. It wasn't large, only covering an area of more than 10 kilometers, but its walls were thick and heavy like a towering mountain, and it was like an ancient fierce beast that was entrenched there. It seemed to be unafraid of the erosion of time or natural disasters. The City of Guidance. Many people revealed fanaticism and longing on their faces. When the Great Era arrived, 3,000 divine sacrifice altars would descend in different areas of the world, and only through the divine sacrifice altar could one enter the absolute domain. And the so-called City of Guidance was the place where the divine sacrifice altar was about to descend. The world was gloomy, and the huge city stood silently with its gates closed. The roars of ferocious beasts and the cries of divine birds resounded in the surroundings of the enormous city. Various cultivators and powers occupied an area and were waiting. There were a huge number of people. Everywhere that met the eye, the entire City of Guidance was surrounded by the figures of cultivators that were like tidewater, and it was densely packed like a sea of people. When the Great Era arrives, the divine sacrifice altar will descend upon this city. At that time, the seal on this city will be opened to allow cultivators to enter. Old Toad reminded in a low voice. Lin Sun nodded. If he hadn't seen it with his own two eyes, he would absolutely be unable to imagine that such a mysterious ancient city actually stood towering in the depths of an ancient battlefield that seemed like ruins. There are too many people, at least a few tens of thousands of people. Alu was slightly shocked, and he sized up the surroundings. There were numerous cultivators in the surroundings of the city, but if one distinguished them carefully, one would notice that all of them were in groups, and they belonged to different cultivation camps, causing them to be clearly distinguished. Lin Sun noticed as well that there were many peerless figures in the surroundings of the city. They dominated different areas, and they were like cranes amongst chickens and were extremely conspicuous. There was a sun crow standing proudly there, and its bright golden feathers were dazzling like the sun. A group of men and women gathered around it, and a large area around them was vacated. No one dared to approach it, and it was no different from dominating an area. At the same time, the cultivators of the Beast Spirit Mountain were also there, and they gathered together. The most eye-catching one was a proud and aloof man in ancient clothes with a high crown and a green flute at his waist. This man is called Liang Xuyin, an ancient freak that has recently been born in the Beast Spirit Mountain. His strength is unfathomable, and I heard that he has mastered some kind of magical great way to heaven and can control the power of all spirits. Someone was discussing and revealing the identity of the man in ancient clothes with a high crown. In addition, Lin Sun and others also noticed that the gray-haired young man with a beast-bone longbow on his back was talking with a group of people. When he noticed Lin Sun's gaze, the gray-haired young man also looked over with a playful gaze, and the corners of his mouth raised in a provocative arc suddenly. A clear cry was heard, and a cyan-scale heavenly eagle descended from the sky. Sitting on the eagle was a woman with a smooth forehead and a cold look. She was also good-looking, and her breath was very powerful. At first glance, one could tell that she was not an ordinary person. Lin Sun and others had seen this woman on the way before, and they were even ridiculed by her sarcastic words, saying that if they insisted on moving forward, they were destined to become a stepping stone. P.S. Let's warm up. The day after tomorrow, the goldfish would break out with 10 chapters as promised. The pressure was very, very great, but it was also very exciting. After all, this was the first time that the Book of Tianjiao had broken out with 10 chapters, which was absolutely unprecedented. Chapter 1142. The cyan scale heavenly eagle's wings were more than 30 meters long, and its entire body was covered in dazzling green scales. It was ferocious and fierce, and when it landed, dust and gravel flew everywhere. Many people in the surroundings retreated as they felt a terrifying pressure, and their expressions couldn't help but change. This cold-looking woman hadn't even made a move, but her mount was already frightening and suppressed the momentum of a portion of the cultivators. Lin Sun and the others were also in this area and didn't retreat. Who is she? It can't be. You don't even know Fairy Ling Hua of Xuandu Taoism sect? Fairy Ling Hua? Could it be that peerless genius who just came out of seclusion a while ago? It's her. The people nearby discussed and looked at the woman sitting on the back of the cyan scale heavenly eagle with awe in their eyes. Every ancient freak had a background that was enough to make any cultivator fearful. Just like this Fairy Ling Hua. Although she was alone, no one dared to underestimate her. You really came to court death. Ling Hua glanced at Lin Sun and the others and said, I'm not looking for trouble with you, but you'd better disappear from my sight now. Her voice was casual, but it revealed a tone of command from above. You want to occupy this area by yourself? Old Toad raised his eyebrows as the anger in his heart rose. This woman was really arrogant. I'm not occupying it, I just don't want to be associated with you, understand? Fairy Ling Hua's tone was flat and cold. In fact, besides Lin Sun and the others, no one dared to approach within a radius of dozens of meters because they were deterred by Fairy Ling Hua's power. But now, she directly said that she wanted to expel Lin Sun and the others. This arrogant attitude shocked many people. It had to be said that this woman was very powerful. The power she emitted made the cultivators in the surroundings unable to bear it and retreat one after another. The cyan scale heavenly eagle she sat on was also unruly and looked down on the crowd. Its wings flowed with divine lightning and tore through the void in an extremely powerful manner. All the cultivators in this area had retreated far away, and only Lin Sun and the others were still there. They turned a deaf ear to her words, or rather, directly ignored her. Ling Hua's eyes became extremely cold all of a sudden. The cyan scale heavenly eagle suddenly rushed up, emitting dazzling lightning all over its body. It stretched out its sharp claws and grabbed at Lin Sun fiercely. Like a goshawk hunting a rabbit, it wanted to tear it apart. Old Toad and Alu were already furious. If Lin Sun hadn't stopped them, they would have taken action long ago. But now, the other side wouldn't let them go, which made them completely unable to bear it. However, Lin Sun, who had been motionless, moved first. He stretched out his hand and grabbed. It was too fast. In an instant, it had already firmly grabbed onto the green scale heavenly eagle's sharp claws, causing the latter to be unable to escape no matter how it struggled. Ling Hua's eyes narrowed. At this moment, Lin Sun exerted strength in his arms and swung the cyan scale heavenly eagle up and smashed it to the ground. During this process, Ling Hua's figure staggered and was almost flung away. His figure flashed subconsciously and arrived in the void. Bang! The earth trembled, and a huge crater was smashed open. The green scale heavenly eagle's neck was smashed to the point where it almost broke. It let out a hurried and mournful cry, and a pair of wings were broken. Then its body went limp, and it actually fainted from the blow. Blood flowed, and it was a ghastly sight. Lin Sun stood there motionlessly and threw the dizzy divine bird away like he was throwing away garbage. With a plop, the earth was covered in dust. The nearby area was in an uproar. Everyone was frightened. No one had expected that the young man who had been silent from beginning to end would be so fierce when he made a move. Although Ling Hua had avoided this blow, his face suddenly became terrifyingly cold. His whole body emitted an overwhelming murderous aura, and he was about to pounce on Lin's son. "It's him, Demon Lin!" Someone cried out involuntarily. It was this voice that made Ling Hua's heart tremble. He stopped what he was doing and looked at Lin's son with a different gaze. Demon Lin. These three words seemed to have magic power, attracting the attention of all the nearby people, and the atmosphere suddenly became much quieter. In today's world, if anyone dared to say that they hadn't heard of the deeds of Demon Lin, they would definitely be laughed at, because they knew about Lin Sun's past achievements. When they learned that the young man was the famous Demon Lin in the ancient Desolation realm, all the cultivators present couldn't help but be moved. No wonder he's so fearless. It turns out to be him. Someone whispered. Not long ago, the news that Demon Lin defeated the ancient freak Jin Xiaoming shocked the world and set off a great uproar. Among the current generation, only Demon Lin is not afraid to fight against the ancient freak. Someone sighed with emotion. After confirming Lin Sun's identity, what happened before seemed to be natural. Fairy Ling Hua might be terrifying, but her opponent was Demon Lin. How dare a feathered beast beside her offend Demon Lin? Wasn't he courting death? In the distance, the gray-haired man carrying the animal bone longbow on his back became unnatural. He remembered how he had looked down on Lin Sun and the others before. On the Scarlet Ship, the successors of the Beast Mountain looked at each other. They didn't expect that there was a Demon Lin among the cultivators they had driven away on their way here. All of a sudden, some frowned, and some didn't take it seriously. Only Liang Xuyin, who was the leader, remained calm and indifferent. "You're Lin's son? I misjudged you. I didn't realize how great you were." Ling Hua spoke at this moment, her expression still cold and stern. "But no matter who you are, don't you think you've gone too far by hurting my mount?" Old Toad was furious. "You bitch, you were mean and cold on the way here. Now that you've arrived, you want to drive us away. I can't be bothered to argue with you, but you've gone too far. Don't you have any shame?" Alu was even more direct. He stared at the unconscious cyan scale heavenly eagle on the ground and said, "Big brother, I want to eat eagle meat." Lin Sun had chosen to bear with it because he didn't want to attract too much attention before entering the absolute summit domain. After all, it was definitely not a good thing to stand out at this time, as he would be targeted. But bearing with it didn't mean being afraid. The other party had taken the initiative to offend them. If they showed weakness, they would think they were easy to bully. "You want to eat meat? Easy." Lin Sun drew his fingers together and cut off the cyan scale heavenly eagle's neck. Blood sprayed out like a spring. Everyone trembled. This was really a demon. He killed the other party's mount and even planned to eat it. "You're courting death." Ling Hua let out a sharp cry and was completely enraged. Her mount was killed right before her eyes, and this was undoubtedly an extraordinary humiliation. Boom! However, just as she was about to make a move, an old man with silver hair and beard suddenly appeared out of thin air and stood in front of Ling Hua. He said, "Miss, it's not good to fight with others before entering the absolute summit domain." The old man's body was flowing with the terrifying momentum that only old monsters in the King realm had. As soon as he appeared, many people's expressions changed. But there were also many people who weren't afraid, because each of them was followed by a big shot to protect them in the dark. "Uncle Yin, he killed my mount. How can I bear with it?" Ling Hua's face was as cold as frost, and her eyes were full of frightening, killing intent. "It's just a feathered beast. It's nothing compared to the fortune in the absolute summit domain," the old man said lightly. This scene was very strange. It was obviously a king who had arrived, but from beginning to end, he was stopping Ling Hua from making a move. He didn't have the slightest intention to help her. But those who really knew the inside story knew that in today's world, anyone who dared to bully Lin Sun had to consider the consequences of doing so. After all, the matter of the mysterious woman killing her way to the 6 ancient orthodoxies by herself and forcing them to bow their heads was still spread in the world. "All right, I'll remember it." Ling Hua took a deep breath and stared at Lin Sun with a gloomy gaze. "Cherish the time you have now. I'll get even with you once we enter the absolute summit domain." Her tone was icy cold and filled with hatred. It caused the air in this area to seem as if it had frozen, and many cultivators felt a chill in their hearts. After that, Ling Hua turned around and left this area. Young man, it's not so easy to survive in the absolute summit domain. Take care. The old man with white hair and beard glanced at Lin Sun with a ghastly gaze. If it was possible, he wished for nothing more than to kill Lin Sun immediately. But in the end, he restrained himself. Just as everyone guessed, it wasn't that he didn't want to, but he didn't dare. Of course, what he feared was not Lin Sun, but the mysterious woman behind Lin Sun. Old thing, when we come back from the absolute summit domain, I'd like to see if you still dare to talk big like this. Old Toad sneered. The old man snorted coldly and turned away. This farce came to an end, but the people nearby didn't dare to treat Lin Sun and his companions like before. Even few people dared to approach this area. Originally, after recognizing Lin Sun's identity, there were still many people who wanted to talk to him and make friends. After all, after entering the absolute summit domain, even if they couldn't act together, they could at least avoid some conflicts. But after witnessing the scene of Lin Sun and Ling Hua becoming enemies, these people gave up the idea. Although Demon Lin was strong, he also had a lot of enemies. To make friends with him, they also needed to consider the risks they had to bear. In this way, the area where Lin Sun and his companions were became more and more deserted. However, Lin Sun was also happy to be idle. He ordered Old Toad and Alu to start dissecting the cyan scale heavenly eagle together, intending to roast it and eat it. Anyway, they had nothing to do. Seeing this, some cultivators in the distance were speechless. Demon Lin was too bold. Didn't he know that this would further agitate Fairy Ling Hua? Many people looked at Ling Hua, and sure enough, they saw that the latter's pretty face was already as gloomy as water, and her whole body was emitting a terrifying and boundless killing intent. But Lin Sun and his companions didn't seem to notice it at all. Old Toad was skewering meat, Alu was lighting the fire, and Lin Sun was preparing the seasonings. The three of them had a clear division of labor, and soon they began roasting the cyan scale heavenly eagle. Ling Hua withdrew her gaze. She was worried that if she continued to watch, she wouldn't be able to control herself and would directly attack. It was also at this moment that a Golden Crow clan powerhouse quietly approached and transmitted his voice. "Miss Ling Hua, my young master invites you." Ling Hua was stunned, and she looked up at the area closest to the City of Guidance. There was a golden-robed man leaning lazily on a throne that seemed to be made of gold. Chapter 1143. The roasted meat was soon cooked. It was golden and oily with seasonings smeared on it. The tempting aroma wafted through the air. Many cultivators swallowed their saliva secretly. Damn, it smelled so good. The most eye-catching was a pair of roasted wings that were more than 30 meters long. Even though they had been chopped into several pieces, they were still ridiculously large. Lin Sun, Old Toad, and Alu sat on the ground, each holding a roasted eagle wing. They ate until their mouths were full of oil, and they drank a big bowl of wine from time to time. Everyone was speechless. This was the City of Guidance, where elites from all over the world gathered to prepare for entering the domain of Apex and fighting for hegemony. But Demon God Lin and his companions were having a picnic. Black dog meat is the most delicious when cooked, golden heavenly snake meat is the best when boiled in a soup, and green eagle meat is the most delicious when roasted. Lin Sun commented. Old Toad and Alu nodded fiercely as they wolfed down the food. Many cultivators nearby gasped. Demon God Lin's appetite was getting more and more picky. He ate as if he was commenting on all the delicacies in the world. Many cultivators' mounts were ferocious beasts and divine birds. At this moment, they were covered in goosebumps. They secretly swore to stay away from Demon God Lin. With a cough, a tall and thin man walked over. He looked down at Lin Sun, who was sitting on the ground, and said, "Lin Sun, the seventh prince invites you. Come with me." His voice was flat, but there was an indisputable tone in it. Everyone's expression changed. They recognized the tall and thin man as Wu Hong, an expert of the Golden Crow lineage. The seventh prince that Wu Hong spoke of was currently in front of the nearest city gate to the City of Guidance. His name was Wu Lingfei, a peerless and monstrous figure. Although he wasn't an ancient freak, Wu Lingfei was a royal descendant of the Golden Crow lineage. His bloodline was pure, his talent was outstanding, and his combat strength was also heaven-defying. "What's the matter?" Lin Sun asked casually while chewing the roasted meat. He didn't even raise his head. Wu Heng's face darkened. He repeated in a serious tone, "The seventh prince invites you." "I'm busy." Lin Sun refused without hesitation. Wu Hong was stunned, and he seemed to have never imagined that there would actually be someone who dared to disregard him after he announced the name of the seventh crown prince. What annoyed him most was that from the beginning to the end, Lin Sun just sat on the ground and only cared about eating meat. He didn't have any awareness of getting up to receive orders. "Are you sure?" Wu Hong took a deep breath and decided to give Lin Sun another chance to consider. Old Toad couldn't help rolling its eyes and saying unhappily, "You're just an errand boy. Since I've already rejected your invitation, why are you still standing here? Go back and tell that seventh prince that I'm not free." These words were very blunt. Wu Hong was infuriated to the point his face turned gloomy. Even though there were numerous cultivator powers present here, the Golden Crow line of their Sunset Tang Valley was supreme. But now, there was actually someone who had rejected his invitation time and time again. Furthermore, his attitude was very casual. This was intolerable. "Humph, I gave you a chance, but you didn't grasp it. You're on your own now." Wu Hong left behind a ruthless sentence and turned to leave. Seeing this scene, everyone couldn't help but click their tongues in their hearts. Lin Sun really deserved to be the world-famous demon god Lin. His courage alone was beyond the reach of ordinary people. That was the envoy sent by the Golden Crow line, but he was so casually dismissed. In front of the majestic ancient city wall, the third prince of the Golden Crow line casually reclined on the golden throne with a comfortable and lazy manner. "When Lin Sun comes later, I'll make him bow his head and apologize to you. This is also my sincerity," Wu Lingfei said slowly. His hair was crystal clear like a golden waterfall, and his facial features were sharp and angular, as if they were chiseled by a knife and axe with a threatening spirit. "It's not impossible to cooperate with you, but I won't accept your apology," Ling Hua said coldly on one side, with a touch of hatred between her eyebrows. Wu Lingfei was speechless and transmitted his voice to her. "Miss Ling Hua, everyone in the world knows that Demon Godlin's combat power is extraordinary. We can draw him over first and let him risk his life for us. When we seize the opportunity, well, you know." Ling Hua was stunned. She realized that Wu Lingfei's move was to make use of Lin Sun and not to cooperate with him. She said with a faint smile, "Taoism peer, you won't cooperate with me with the same intention, will you?" Wu Lingfei laughed, and then he sat up straight on the throne. His expression suddenly became serious, and he said, "I can swear in the name of the Golden Crow line that I won't betray you after crossing the river." Ling Hua didn't express an opinion. It was also at this moment that she suddenly smelled an alluring aroma of meat, causing her to feel a little hungry. Looking in the direction of the smell, Ling Hua's face suddenly became extremely ugly, and she almost bit her teeth into pieces. This hateful demon god Lin actually roasted and ate her mouth. Wu Lingfei was also stunned for a moment, and a strange light flashed in his eyes. Then he comforted her, "Miss, don't be angry. A little impatience will spoil great plans. When we enter the absolute summit domain, there will be plenty of opportunities to deal with him." Ling Hua's voice was piercingly cold, and she said, "We can cooperate. Kill him with me, and I'll promise you now." Wu Lingfei's eyes flickered, and he began to think. At this moment, Wu Hong returned in a hurry and said with a gloomy face, "Seventh Prince, that demon god Lin doesn't know what's good for him." Not only did he not come, but his attitude was also extremely bad. He told everything that had happened before. Hearing this, Ling Hua couldn't help but sneer. She looked at Wu Lingfei and wanted to see what decision he would make. Wu Lingfei was also silent for a moment. He really didn't expect that Lin Sun would directly refuse his invitation. Was he not going to give him face? An imperceptible coldness flashed in the depths of Wu Lingfei's eyes. Immediately, he smiled slightly, stood up, and said, "Forget it. Let me personally invite him. It's normal and understandable for a person like Demon God Lin to put on airs." Wu Hong was very indignant. He opened his mouth and was about to say something, but when Wu Lingfei's eyes swept over him, he shivered all over, and he dared not say another word. "Lin Sun, I'm Wu Lingfei of the Golden Crow Branch. I've long heard of Brother Lin's name. Since we are fated to meet here today, can you come over for a chat?" Suddenly, the whole world was covered by Wu Lingfei's clear voice, which made all the cultivators present restless. No one expected that after Wu Hong was rejected, Wu Lingfei, the seventh prince of the Golden Crow Branch, would take the initiative to invite Lin Sun at this moment. I'm afraid that only Demon God Lin deserves such treatment. Many cultivators didn't know what was going on. They just thought that Wu Lingfei thought highly of Lin Sun, and they couldn't help feeling a little envious and emotional. Inviting him for no reason is no different from being solicitous for no reason. You have to take it easy. No one in the Golden Crow Branch is good, from old to young. Old Toad reminded him secretly. Lin Sun nodded to show that he understood. "Taoism Peer Wu, please tell me what advice you have." Lin Sun also spoke loudly, and his voice spread far away. Immediately, the faces of the people of the Golden Crow Branch became much colder. Their seventh prince had taken the initiative to invite Lin Sun, but this guy was still stubborn and didn't have the slightest awareness of coming over. Wu Lingfei was stunned as well, and then he said via voice transmission from afar, "It can't be considered to be guidance. I just want to ask Brother Lin to come over and resolve a misunderstanding with Miss Linghua. After all, when the divine sacrifice Tao altar descends, all of us will have to enter a region, and it's better to have another friend than another enemy." His voice was gentle, and it was like a spring breeze. Many cultivators secretly sighed with emotion. This seventh prince of the Golden Crow was a peerless genius, but his demeanor was easy to make people have a good impression of him. However, when he heard this, Lin Sun immediately smiled and said, "Resolve a misunderstanding? Okay, let her apologize to us three brothers. Otherwise, there's no need to talk about anything." Ling Hua was already full of anger, and when he heard this, he couldn't help but say, "Want me to apologize? That's really wishful thinking." Wu Lingfei's expression also became cold, and he said, "Brother Lin, it's better to squash enmity than to keep it alive. If you take a step back, maybe we can still be friends and compete for fortune in the domain of despair together. If you insist on going your own way, I'm afraid we can't be friends anymore." At the end of his words, there was a touch of coldness in his tone. Some cultivators trembled with fear, realizing that Wu Lingfei was not only gentle, but also had his temper and strong side. If they couldn't be friends, of course, they could only be opponents. This was clear to everyone. Wu Lingfei's action was equivalent to giving Lin Sun an ultimatum. Either be a friend or an enemy. There was no other choice. The atmosphere in the field suddenly became gloomy because of these words. Many orthodoxies, such as the cultivators of the Beast's spiritual mountain, were watching with cold eyes. Lin Sun replied without thinking, "Sorry, I don't intend to make friends casually." If Wu Lingfei spoke nicely, Lin Sun would respect him. But Wu Lingfei's words were full of needles and threats, which disgusted Lin Sun. The cultivators in the field were shocked. What did Lin Sun mean? Was he satirizing Wu Lingfei for making friends casually? Sure enough, many people noticed that Wu Lingfei's expression became colder and colder. Although there was no trace of anger, they were afraid that Lin Sun had been sentenced to death in his heart. What the hell? Is he qualified to be a peacemaker? Old Toad murmured. Lin Sun was lost in thought. Wu Lingfei was obviously roping in helpers and planned to act together after entering the domain of despair. It seemed that Ling Hua from Xuandu Taoism sect had already agreed to cooperate with Wu Lingfei. So, what on earth did Wu Lingfei promise to make an ancient freak like her choose to cooperate with him? At the same time, Ling Hua looked indifferent and transmitted her voice. Taoism Pure Wu. Have you made a decision? Wu Lingfei's expression remained unchanged. There was no sign of anger at all. He smiled slightly and said, Then I wish us a happy cooperation. Ling Hua's eyes lit up. She knew that the reason why Wu Lingfei wanted to cooperate with her was nothing more than selfishness, but it didn't matter. The reason why she agreed to cooperate with him was that she also planned to make use of his strength. They were just using each other. Ling Hua was well aware of this. Dong! Suddenly, the whole world trembled fiercely, and there was a dull, shaking sound. Everything in the world, including the whole Zhou Su, seemed to be shaking. All the cultivators in the field trembled and staggered with fear in their hearts. It was like an unprecedented earthquake. At the same time, the 4 great realms of the ancient desolation also experienced a similar shock. P.S. Tomorrow's outbreak arrangement. The first update will be released after midnight, the second update at 10 a.m., and the third update at 12 noon. That's all for now. After the 4th update, there will be updates in succession. Chapter 1144. The previous chapter had the wrong number of chapters, so it had been corrected. Dong! The world shook. The sound was so depressing that it made all the creatures in the world tremble. At this moment, near the realm river that connected the 4 realms of the realm of ancient desolation, terrible disasters were happening. Countless cities, mountains, rocks, and trees were being destroyed. Everything collapsed and turned into powder because the border river had completely disappeared. The barrier between the 4 great realms was broken just like that. It was as if 4 incomparably huge continents had collided violently at that moment. That kind of power involved the origin of the world, Zhou Su, and heaven and earth. When they collided, the terrifying destructive power was enough to make even sages tremble. It's coming. At this moment, in the East Victory, West Hung, South Xian, and North Dipper, countless sages who were cultivating in seclusion stopped what they were doing. The Great Era was coming. The ancient orthodoxies, the Saint Hermit Grounds, and every force in the ancient desolation realm realized that the Great Era they had been waiting for a long time, a glorious era where destruction and rise coexisted, was about to begin today. 10,000 years was too long. They had to seize every moment. Whether it was a great era or a chaotic era, it was unprecedented and different from the past. This day has finally come. In the Saint Hermit Grounds, a sage in the divine secret pavilion sighed. It was hard to tell if he was happy or sad. What great era! The most glorious era also means the most dangerous. People only stare at the dazzling moment, but they don't know that chaos is about to come. An old antique who had been silent for countless years said angrily with a hint of melancholy. The great era is like a bait. It's destined to be coveted and coveted. The war between the 9 zones is not far away. A sage from the great Zen temple made a prediction. In the ancient times, the 8 zones attacked and triggered the Nirvana War. Many sages died, many ancient orthodoxies perished in the war, and the ancient desolation realm was divided into 4 worlds. Today's great era is different from past. If the war is ignited, neither sages nor ants will be able to stay out of it. At this moment, countless cultivators of the ancient sects were shocked, and they felt a chill run down their spines. They felt indescribably terrified because it was the first time they'd heard of such news. The pattern of the ancient desolation realm, which has existed for thousands of years, is destined to be reshaped in this great world. No one knows whether the ancient desolation realm will rise or perish because of this. Everything is a variable. Tribulation, luck. No one could decide for themselves. The world is like a game of chess. It's hard to predict. In the extremity, let us strive to cross. Countless secrets were spoken of by various saints, and it caused monstrous waves to arise from it. It caused the cultivators of the various sects to feel an indescribable feeling of horror. Great era? Troubled times? Who can give an answer? Everyone was perplexed. There was no solution to this situation. The ancient desolation realm was changing. Even the ordinary people of this world were terrified because it was as if a great earthquake was happening. Heaven and earth swayed, scenes of unrest everywhere. Everyone was running and hiding, but they didn't know where to run or where to hide, because the turbulence was everywhere. In the forest, groups of beasts ran wildly and vicious birds cried out in alarm. In the lake and ocean, the waves rolled, and the creatures drifted with the waves. Regardless of whether it was an ordinary person, a cultivator, a demon, or a saint, all of them were unable to maintain their composure in the face of this unprecedented and shocking change. Even the saints couldn't see through the shocking changes that were happening in the entire ancient desolation realm. As a result, no one knew just how many mountains were uprooted from the ground and shot into the sky during this tremor. Countless spirit veins, spirit medicines, treasures, and divine materials were growing in every area of the world like mushrooms after the rain. Countless spirits and spirits had appeared in the world at this moment. Countless ancient sites, ruins, and mysterious places that had been submerged in the river of time had reappeared in the world. The entire ancient desolation realm was going through a shocking change. It was like the awakening of insects. All kinds of changes were happening at an unbelievable speed, changing the original scene and pattern of the world. The heavenly cycle, the fortune of the great path, the spiritual chi of heaven and earth. Everything was changing, and it was advancing in a brilliant direction. Dawn. In the sky above the ancient battlefield, the loud sound was like the sound of a drum, shocking the divine soul. It contained the supreme power of the heavenly cycle. The gloomy sky was filled with magnificent and gorgeous clouds, and it was full of vitality. It swept away the haze in the world and gradually made it holy. On the ancient battlefield, which was full of ruins, decay, and devastation, there was an invisible and abundant spirituality flowing and infusing the earth. Grass and trees were growing in the ruins, and all the things in the mountains and rivers were covered with a layer of misty airflow, illusory and misty. The grass and trees were fresh, and the tender leaves were green, glowing with a crystal luster. The lifeless ancient battlefield seemed to be resurrected from wither and glowed with a different kind of vitality. A leaf in autumn. Even the ancient battlefield had such a shocking change. It could be imagined what kind of transformation the entire ancient desolation realm was going through. The prelude to a great world has finally come. In front of the city of guidance, Lin Sun and the other cultivators present, after the initial horror, all became excited at this moment, and their faces were full of longing. They clearly felt that there was an abundant vitality between heaven and earth. Their bodies seemed to be washed by clear spring water, and they felt comfortable all over. Their perception of heaven and earth, their comprehension of the Great Way, and their control of the Tao seemed to be clearer than before. This was because the power of the Great Way of the heavenly cycle was changing. To the younger generation, the Great Era was resplendent, splendid, and exciting. The coming of the Great World would bring unexpected opportunities, which could enable them to set foot on the peak of the king realm that they dreamed of. This was undoubtedly an irresistible temptation for any cultivator. Otherwise, why did those ancient freaks have to endure the loneliness of the vicissitudes of life and only awaken in this world? Everything was for the sake of this great era. It's finally here. Lin Sun looked up at the sky, and his heart was surging. When he left the mortal world and entered the ancient desolation realm, what was the purpose? First, revenge. Second, to prove the way. Revenge, there was already some progress. And to prove the way was in this great world. Lin Sun still clearly remembered what the current emperor of Xiao Empire had said before he left. The ancient desolation realm is destined to become a place where the strong compete for supremacy, and the world will fall into an unprecedented turmoil. You only need to remember one word when you go to the ancient desolation realm. Strive. The struggle for the Great Way is like 100 barges vying for the current. If you fall one step behind, you may never set foot on the top of the Great Way in this life. If you want to fight for a great fortune in this great world that is about to begin, what you need is nothing more than strength. In the past, you often used the strategy of borrowing strength to fight strength. This is just a small trick. You should remember that in the face of absolute strength, no matter how wise you are and how amazing your strategy is, you are doomed to be smashed. Strength is the great way. The transformation of the state of mind, the improvement of cultivation, the strengthening of the soul, and the strengthening of the body, in the final analysis, are all reflected in the changes of the strength you have mastered. This kind of strength can make you a king, fight against the tribulation of immortality, and even help you become a sage. The great way of the heavens is also a kind of strength, but it needs to be comprehended and understood. The great way of the heavens is also a kind of strength, but it needs to be cultivated and mastered. Even if it's the knowledge, experience, and experiences that you have, aren't they also a form of inner strength? With these, you can further understand the true meaning of cultivation. Strength is definitely not simply brute force. It is the simplest explanation of cultivation. Now Lin Sun had set foot on the top of the reincarnation developing realm, but he still felt enlightened when he thought of these words that the emperor had said. In his mind, the figure of a man in green clothes and straw shoes appeared uncontrollably. His figure was as tall as a pine tree. This was a supreme figure who made all living beings in the world revere, and countless strong men bowed to him. Facing him was like facing a dominator who controlled the universe and stood at the peak of the world. It was also at this moment that Lin Sun finally realized how powerful this emperor was. As early as 10 years ago, he had predicted the coming of the great era and earnestly reminded himself. At this moment, not only Lin Sun, but also Alu and Old Toad beside him were in different moods. They looked up at the sky and thought quickly. The same was true of other practitioners present. This great era was finally going to unveil the mysterious veil in front of them. The change in their state of mind was really indescribable. This turmoil, which affected the entire ancient desolation realm, lasted for 10 days. In these 10 days, the 4 worlds had been completely restored to one, and the ancient style and scenery of the ancient desolation realm had been restored. In these 10 days, there had been earth-shaking changes in countless states, cities, and boundless suburbs in the world. The spiritual chi was several times richer than before. Everything in the world had given birth to products and resources that were enough to make people crazy. Even the order of Zhoutian, the longitude and latitude of heaven and earth, and the fate of the Great Way, had undergone an unprecedented transformation invisibly. Happiness came from the extreme. Since the Nirvana War, the divided ancient desolation realm had been silent for too long. Now, the accumulated power finally broke out. In exchange for today's great era, it was not an exaggeration to say that it was unprecedentedly brilliant. In these 10 days, the 3,000 guiding places in different areas of the ancient desolation realm had already welcomed countless practitioners. Geniuses, heroes, talents, ancient freaks, peerless evildoers. From different areas, they poured into the 3,000 guiding places like a torrent. Because the prelude to the great era had been opened, and the absolute domain was about to come. Only by waiting at the place of guidance would one be able to enter the divine sacrifice, Tao, altar, and enter the region of despair that countless cultivators dreamt of. The wind was blowing. The clouds were surging. The eyes of the whole world began to focus on this battle for the absolute domain. Chapter 1145. The great era was coming, and the world was going to change. The 3,000 guiding places in different areas of the ancient desolation soon became the place where the world gathered. The talents and talents of the ancient orthodoxies, the direct descendants of the ancient tribes and families of the saints, and the younger generation all flocked to different guiding places like a tide. All the cultivators in the world were paying attention to it. This day was destined to be recorded in the annals of history. The arrival of the most brilliant era would become an indelible mark and be remembered by future generations. The great Tao is within reach. In the heaven-reaching sword sect, Yun Qingbai looked as calm as ever. However, between his sword-like eyebrows, there was an unprecedented sharpness that seemed to be able to pierce through the sky. 10 years of sharpening a sword. It was time to test it in the Great Era. He took the old sword case from the sword boy and carried it on his back solemnly like he did every day when he practiced swordsmanship. Everyone knew that Yun Qingbai never carried a sword. Carrying a sword on his back was his swordsmanship. On the same day, Yun Qingbai went down the mountain alone. It's time to go. On this day, Wang Xuanyu, Mi Hongjin, Yimo, Yin Zhanxiu, and other influential figures of the ancient orthodoxies, accompanied by their elders, went to different guiding places. Some ancient freaks, such as Qi Lingxiao, who practiced the six prisons devastation method, Lin Shui, the peerless saintess who made countless talents bow down 3,000 years ago, and by Longting of the White Flood Dragon lineage, they all started to take action. Tens of thousands of heavenly geniuses from past to present, began to gather in the great world, appearing in different places of guidance, drawing the attention of the world. At the same time, the forces in the Saint Hermit Place also took action. The Great Zen Temple, the Divine Secret Pavilion, the Ksitigarbha Temple, the Heavenless Sect, these ancient forces, which had been isolated from the world, finally began to come out after the coming of the Great Era. Remember to kill that dog Lin's son. In the heavens' pivot holy land, a big shot ordered. Do you still remember the shame that little bastard brought to our sect? I believe you should know what to do after entering the absolute summit domain. In any case, we must never allow this bastard to become a king. In the great world, the first is to seize the fortune of King Chung, and the second is to kill Lin's son. Similar conversations took place in the pure lands of longevity, the sacred grounds of numinous treasures, the heavenly sword sect, the pure lands of longevity, the vast Sea Dao sect, and the Black Sea Tengu clan. Back then, the mysterious woman was alone. She turned into an animal, herding sheep as she set foot on these ancient inheritances. This type of extraordinary shame and humiliation, even though they could endure it, no one would forget it. Now, the region of absolute peaks was about to arrive, and it was impossible for anyone above the king realm to enter. This had undoubtedly become the best opportunity for them to take revenge. Moreover, the inheritors of these orthodoxies that were about to enter the apex zone were not only numerous, but there were also ancient freaks among them. This was their true foundation and trump card. The world was changing. In the sky above the ancient battlefield, the haze had been completely swept away a long time ago. The clear sky was clear like glass, while copious vitality bloomed within the ruins, causing the heavens and the earth to be enshrouded in spirit energy, and it was peaceful and pure. Along with the passage of time, the figures of cultivators were like tidewater that drowned an area of 50 kilometers before the city of guidance. In just a few days, the number of people here had increased by a few times. Most of them were inheritors of orthodoxies and clans, and there was no lack of top geniuses and ancient freaks. Under such circumstances, no matter if it was the line of the Golden Crow or the myriad Bee Spirit Mountain, all of them seemed to be very restrained, and they weren't willing to cause a conflict at this moment. Lin Sun, the Old Toad, and Alu were gathered together, yet they seemed to be weak in this area where there were numerous orthodoxies. Those orthodoxies had at least a few dozen people, and some even had hundreds or thousands of people. Even though there weren't many figures that could truly be considered to be at the top, this level of strength was still very shocking. Fortunately, the cultivators that arrived in this area had successively found out about Lin Sun's identity, so even though they were few in number, no one came looking for trouble with them. More and more people are coming. The old toad sighed lightly. This was already the 4th day since the arrival of the Great Era. In these past few days, it wasn't just the heavens and the earth that had undergone an upheaval. Even the number of cultivators that had come to the City of Guidance had doubled. It could be foreseen how great the competition would be after they entered the region of absolute peaks. Alu was snoring loudly, while Lin Sun was sitting cross-legged instead, and they seemed as if they were completely indifferent to what was happening in the outside world. The old toad was speechless. These two fellows are really heartless. The latest news, the latest news. In the distance, an expert of the Wind Speaker clan flapped his wings and flew over, attracting the attention of many cultivators. In these past few days, all the cultivators that arrived at the City of Guidance could only obtain information from the experts of the Wind Speaker clan if they wanted to know about the news of the outside world. The Saint of the Divine Secret Pavilion has deduced that the Divine Sacrifice altar will descend into the world within 7 days. Bang! The entire area was seething with excitement. Many cultivators couldn't sit still anymore, and their eyes lit up. Waiting was undoubtedly the most unbearable time, especially when there were numerous cultivators rushing over at every moment, and it caused the pressure on everyone to multiply. According to the experts of my clan, the number of cultivators that have gathered before the 3,000 guidance grounds in the region of ancient desolation has already exceeded 50 million people. When this news spread out, the expressions of many people changed slightly, and their hearts tightened. Why are there so many people? Someone was surprised. In next to no time, someone gave the answer. The region of ancient desolation was extremely vast, and it was scattered with countless states and cities. The number of cultivators there was in the hundreds of millions. It was common knowledge that the conditions to enter the absolute region were very simple. All cultivators below the king realm could enter. This meant that so long as one met the requirements, then no matter if one was a peak figure in the younger generation or not, all cultivators had the qualifications to enter the absolute region. The peak figures did so for the sake of seizing heaven, defying fortune, and attaining the king realm. On the other hand, other cultivators didn't have such extravagant hopes. They'd merely entered the absolute region for the sake of seeking fortuitous encounters and fortune. For example, why would some ancient sects dispatch so many disciples? It was very simple. It was for the sake of seizing the fortune within the absolute region as much as possible. Even if they couldn't become a peak king realm expert, they would at least have a very high chance of advancing into the king realm. No matter how bad it was, they would be able to find some spirit herbs and precious treasures that could only be chanced upon by luck. On the other hand, some weaker cultivators naturally had similar intentions and intended to enter the absolute region to try their luck. Even if they were clearly aware that it was extremely dangerous, how could they not take a risk for the sake of rising up and becoming stronger? In this way, it could be imagined how many qualified cultivators would swarm into the absolute region when the absolute region descended this time. Everyone might not know this, but the guiding cities in front of the ancient battlefield are considered to be better. Some of the guiding cities that are distributed in flourishing areas have millions of cultivators gathered here. That scale is absolutely terrifying. The powerhouses of the Wind Talker clan sighed with emotion. The competition is getting more and more brutal. Someone was deeply worried. No matter how many there are, they're just cannon fodder. They can only pave the way for others to become a king with blood and bones. Someone was proud and disdainful. If the weak want to rise, they can only fight with their lives. Although the hope is slim, if they can really seize the opportunity in the absolute region, perhaps it's enough for them to rise rapidly. Unfortunately, the chances are too slim, 1 in 10,000. True fortune isn't obtained by luck at all. There is endless discussion in the field. Before the divine sacrifice altar descends, there's something I have to tell you. Old Toad looked at Lin Sun and Ah Lu and transmitted his voice to them. The path we choose will lead us to the immortal burning realm of the 3,000 realms. As long as we enter, every cultivator will be separated and transmitted to different areas of the immortal burning realm. Because the laws of heaven and earth inside are different, some communication methods used in the outside world can't be used at all. If we 3 brothers want to meet, we must arrive at the ancient immortal burning realm. The ancient immortal burning realm? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. Yes, that's the central place of the immortal burning realm, also known as the Realm City. There's a similar ancient city in every realm. Speaking of this, Old Toad reminded them, you should be careful at that time. Although there are countless fortunes hidden in the absolute region, there are also many dangers. Lin Sun and Alu nodded. Of course, the most important thing is to go to the ancient, immortal burning realm as soon as possible. At that time, I'll take you to an amazing place of fortune. At the end of his words, Old Toad's saliva flowed out, as if recalling the past experience. At the same time, other cultivators present were also communicating in secret. Some ancient orthodoxies had mastered secrets that outsiders couldn't know, and their understanding of the absolute region was no less than that of Old Toad. At this time, they were also exhorting their successors. As time went by, more and more cultivators gathered in front of the 3,000 guiding places in the ancient desolation realm, and the atmosphere became more and more oppressive. Boom! On this day, in the sky above the ancient battlefield, a sacred beam of light fell from the sky. It was extremely dazzling and holy, so magnificent that it made people's hearts tremble. Everyone shot their gazes over in unison, and their entire bodies trembled from excitement. The divine sacrifice Tao altar that they've been waiting for a long time. It was finally coming. That sacred beam of light was the derivation of Tao, which had appeared several times in ancient times. Today it came again, magnificent and holy. Not to mention the reincarnation developing realm powerhouses, even some old monsters of the king realm present, and the sages hidden in the dark narrowed their eyes and stared at it with rapt attention. That was the supreme order of the Great Way. It was originally invisible, but now it was revealed. If one could comprehend it, it might even help the path of Tao. A rain of light fluttered, crystal clear, and filled the world. At this moment, everyone felt the aura of Tao, and their expressions were solemn as they silently comprehended it. Unfortunately, this kind of power was too supreme. Although they could feel it when they wanted to comprehend it, it was hazy like flowers in a mirror or the moon in the water. Boom! The bright beam of light rushed into the guiding city, and suddenly, endless Tao light emerged, dyeing the world with a divine aura. The light was like a flowing galaxy, and the divine rainbow poured down like a waterfall, gorgeous and ethereal, as if the source of Tao was spreading. In the end, the endless Tao light condensed into an ancient Taoist altar. At the same time, the gate of the guiding city that had been sealed for countless years opened quietly at this moment. Chapter 1146. The Tao altar was extremely tall. It was 993 m tall like a lofty mountain, and it was completely bathed in the pure and holy light of the Tao that seemed like a drifting river of stars. As it stood there, the mottled aura of time settled on it. But when one looked at it carefully, it seemed to be very ordinary and ordinary. However, in the eyes of the saints, this Tao altar was different. It was a primitive scene that was branded with the energy of the laws, and it caused them to feel oppressed and their hearts tremble. Bang! At practically the exact same moment, the same scene occurred at all the 3,000 guidance grounds in the ancient desolation region. Divine light descended and transformed into the divine sacrifice altar that appeared in the world. In an instant, the world was seething with excitement. Even the gazes of the saints burned with desire. Regretfully, they had no fate with this supreme fortune. The divine sacrifice altar was the node of the passageway that led to the apex region. So long as one stepped foot onto the Tao altar, one would be teleported to the corresponding region. Let's go. Calls resounded as cultivators surged towards the divine sacrifice altar like a surging tide. Some great figures sighed endlessly with emotion when they saw this. This was an unprecedentedly grand era that was extremely dazzling, and the most intense battle between geniuses in history was bound to occur in the apex region. Who could trample on their peers and rise to prominence? Who were lucky enough to attain the apex king realm? The answer to all of this would be revealed in the apex region. Charge! All the cultivators in the ancient battlefield seemed as if they'd gone mad as they rushed towards the divine sacrifice altar. Even the top figures and geniuses weren't able to maintain their composure, and they didn't hesitate to take action. Fuck off! Who dares block the way? A group of experts from the Suncrow clan charged forward. Their entire bodies were covered in brilliant golden flames as they tore open a path. Wu Lingfei easily followed them and stepped foot onto the divine sacrifice altar. Rumble. A group of ancient mutants charged forward from a myriad bee spirit mountain, and they pushed aside the cultivators on their path as they charged towards the divine sacrifice altar at the first possible moment. This was very domineering and overbearing, but no one paid attention to it because similar incidents were occurring everywhere. For the sake of entering the apex region at the first possible moment, the disciples of those ancient sects didn't care who you were, and anyone that dared to obstruct you would be blasted flying. Let's take action as well. As he spoke, Lin Sun brought along Old Toad and Alu to move forward in the vast crowd. Buzz, the divine sacrifice Tao altar flickered repeatedly with the light of the Tao, and the cultivators that stepped onto it seemed as if they'd teleported and instantly vanished without a trace. A dash! A blood-curdling scream rang out. It turned out that an old monster king had been blasted away. Blood spurted out of his mouth and nose, and he was almost killed on the spot. This person had taken out his secret treasure and suppressed his cultivation to the level of the reincarnation development realm. But all of this was useless. Not only was his secret treasure destroyed, but he had also almost lost his life. Some old fellows at the king realm were originally eager to make a move, but when they witnessed this scene, their hearts instantly turned cold, and they didn't dare move forward again. But there were people who didn't believe it. Boom! The heavens and the earth trembled. A saint of the Golden Crow lineage made his move. His entire body seemed illusory as endless golden divine radiance rose from it. He swooped down from the sky and attempted to enter the Taoist altar. Evidently, even a saint was unable to resist the temptation of the pinnacle region, and they were willing to take the risk just to enter it. However, the result was frightening. In an instant, this saint's body was pierced by the power of order. His entire body was bathed in blood. He let out a pained roar and fled in panic. All the experts that witnessed this scene couldn't help but feel their scalps go numb, and they were shocked to the point their entire bodies trembled. That was a saint, but before the power of the divine sacrifice altar, he seemed to be vulnerable, and he was heavily injured in the blink of an eye. It was extremely terrifying. At this point, even a saint had extinguished the thought of probing. Consciousness was an unprecedented great creation. It was bound to be something that they couldn't touch. The scene was very chaotic. There were too many cultivators in the field, and all of them swarmed forward, causing the surroundings of the divine sacrifice altar to seem extremely crowded. Lin Sun and the others didn't encounter too many obstacles. Alu was like a barbarian god opening the way, and merely his ferocious aura forced the cultivators along the way to retreat. In next to no time, Alu was the first to rush up, and then Old Toad disappeared along with him. But at the moment when Lin Sun arrived at the divine sacrifice altar, a sudden change occurred. Swish! A wisp of sharp light that was as fine as a cow's hair suddenly appeared and pierced towards the center of Lin Sun's eyebrows. This wisp of sharp light seemed to be invisible. It was too fine and small, and its speed was extremely fast. It was extremely difficult to capture, and it occurred in the most chaotic area, so it was almost impossible to notice. Lin Sun's black pupils suddenly constricted. It was too late to dodge, so he could only display the Basha prohibition to stop this attack. As long as he could stop it for a moment, it was enough. But to Lin Sun's surprise, the Basha prohibition, which was powerful enough to imprison a peerless strongman in an instant, was like an empty shell at this moment. It didn't play any role at all. It was pierced by this wisp of sharp light and rushed to the center of Lin Sun's eyebrows. However, Lin Sun didn't panic, because he had noticed that this was a soul attack. Chop! In the sea of consciousness, little Silver, who was sitting cross-legged in meditation, suddenly opened his eyes. With a swish, he chopped out an invisible sword intent. That wisp of sharp light was actually a light gray-silver needle that was as fine as a hair. It was an extremely treacherous and vicious soul treasure, which was extremely rare. If it were other cultivators, this blow alone would be enough to easily wipe out their spirit. But at this time, under Little Silver's chop, the light gray silver needle was broken into pieces with a bang. Little Silver reached out and grabbed these pieces in his hand. He put them in his mouth and chewed them for a while. Then he suddenly retched with a terrible face. "It's so disgusting. How could it be?" At the same time, a surprised voice sounded out in the distance, and it was instantly locked by Lin Sun's gaze. That person had a delicate appearance, a smooth forehead, and a cold expression. Surprisingly, it was the ancient freak of Xuandu Taoism sect, Ling Hua. At this moment, her face revealed a shocked expression and disbelief. That light gray silver needle was a soul treasure that was priceless and possessed shocking lethality. If it wasn't for revenge against Lin Sun, she wouldn't be willing to use it. But now, not only was this treasure destroyed, Lin Sun was still unharmed. Clang! At this moment, Lin Sun had already made a move without hesitation. The broken blade flashed out and suddenly chopped towards Ling Hua. This woman was simply too vicious. She hadn't even entered the absolute peak region, but she chose this place to launch a sneak attack. She obviously wanted to catch him off guard and take advantage of the opportunity to take his life. Therefore, Lin Sun didn't hold back in this attack. Ling Hua let out a scream. Obviously, she felt threatened, so she fled first and rushed up the divine sacrifice altar. There were too many cultivators here. If this attack hit, it would inevitably injure many people. Lin Sun could only put away the broken blade, but his face had become extremely cold. "Stinking bitch, don't let me catch you." He spoke coldly. Ling Hua turned around with a gloomy expression, and she similarly carried unwillingness as she gritted her teeth and sneered. "I'll wait for you." Her voice hadn't finished resounding through the air when she'd vanished and been teleported away. Swoosh! Without any further delay, Lin Sun charged up the divine sacrifice altar. Instantly, he felt something flash before his eyes, and he lost all his senses. One day later, the 3,000 divine sacrifice altars fell into deathly silence. They were ancient and mottled, and no glow of the Tao flowed out from them. "The reception has ended." A great figure spoke in a low voice. "The next 10 years will depend on their own fortune." A saint sighed with emotion. Some cultivators that rushed over hurriedly seemed as if they'd been struck by lightning when they saw this, and they either beat their chests and stamped their feet, cried out loudly with unwillingness, or wanted to cry, yet had no tears. There were even some that were unable to endure the blow and started wailing loudly. They were only a step away, yet they'd missed the opportunity to enter the absolute peak region. This blow was too heavy, and it caused these cultivators to be on the verge of collapse. The path of cultivation had always been like this. It seemed like they'd missed an opportunity to enter the absolute peak region. Yet in reality, it was very likely that they'd missed a fortuitous encounter that was sufficient to change their fate and path towards a Tao. Ancient trees covered a luxuriant range of mountains. The air surged with abundant and moist spirit energy, and it revealed a primitive and ancient style. The strange thing was that no matter if it was the mountains or the plants, all of them revealed a fiery red color, and they were resplendent like the glow of fire, yet seemed like the glow of blood that was burning. Even the soil on the ground was a type of bright crimson red like blood. When he looked around, the mountains were like flames while the heavens and the earth were crimson red, and it was like he was in a world that was burning. Swoosh! A figure strode forward amidst the mountains. His figure was tall and handsome. His moon-white clothes fluttered with the wind, and his black hair fluttered in the wind. It was precisely Lin Sun. The energy of the Grand Tao in the heavens and the earth is clear and surging. If one comprehends the Grand Tao here, then it's sufficient to be over 3 times faster than in the outside world. The spirit energy here is much denser than in the outside world as well. Even the dew on the leaves of the grass contains copious amounts of spirit energy, and it can be called spirit dew. If I practice, I can make rapid progress in cultivation without the help of the spiritual marrow. The mountains and rivers are filled with beautiful spirits, and there are some spirit materials and precious medicines that have never been heard of or seen in the outside world. It's too rich, and it's simply like a land of treasures that was born from nature. Lin Sun was observing carefully. Using the wind-chasing eyes, he could clearly see through all kinds of mysteries contained in the world, mountains, rivers, and lakes. After being moved to this world, Lin Sun didn't panic or delay. He immediately took action, trying his best to perceive everything he saw, deducing and comparing. In the end, even he had to admit that the absolute peak region was indeed too magical and extraordinary. It was like a pure land of the gods, just like the legendary kingdom of God. The power of the great way between heaven and earth, the spirit energy and vitality hidden in all things in the mountains and rivers were far from comparable to the outside world. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that any random place to cultivate here would have the same effect as cultivating in the blessed enclave in the outside world. This was just Lin Sun's initial observation. If he continued to explore deeper, he was bound to find unexpected gains. Suddenly, a lonely mountain in the distance caught Lin Sun's attention. On the cliff on one side of the mountain, there was a waterfall pouring down, making a rumbling sound of splashing water. On the cliff, inside the waterfall, there was an illusory and gorgeous luster, looming under the cover of the waterfall. Under the gaze of the wind-chasing eyes, the illusory luster couldn't be hidden at all and was reflected in Lin Sun's field of vision. A fiery red spirit flower was swaying in the crevice of the cliff wall. The flower was beautiful and bright red, like a burning blood-red full moon. P.S. Tickets are the driving force of eruption. It's true that it will affect your mood, but let's wait and see. There will be a lot of eruptions today. Chapter 1147. It was a king herb. Lin Sun made a judgment at a glance. Moreover, what moved him was that this king medicine was even more mystical than the king medicines he had seen in the outside world. When the flower swayed, strands of scarlet essence mist would drift out, like a small waterfall spraying out from the pistil. Lin Sun approached it in a flash. The waterfall was like a white dragon, cascading down from the cliff. There was an ancient pine tree on the cliff, scarlet red and ancient, as if a horned dragon was entrenched there. The bright red king herb was rooted in the crevice on one side, absorbing the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and emitting fragrance. Lin Sun couldn't help marveling that the spiritual energy here was so rich like a thick mist. Breathing it casually made him feel as comfortable as soaking in a clear spring. He approached it, but his figure rushed towards the scarlet pine not far away from the king herb. Crack! A violent snapping sound resounded, and then the crimson pine actually let out a shrill cry of pain before swiftly transforming into a black-clothed man. The man's skin was dark green, and a totem was branded on his forehead. His body was tall and strong, and he was an expert from the Kunmu race. The spiritual energy around the cliff has been absorbed by this king herb. It can't accommodate other plants at all. My fellow practitioner, your camouflage is too bad. Lin Sun said calmly. Boom! The man didn't say anything. He directly took action. A green spiritual sword with pine patterns swept out of his palm and chopped at Lin Sun. As soon as the sword was raised, the terrible sword intent was like a raging sea, crushing the void and pressing down. It was extremely horrible. However, Lin Sun didn't even look at it. He stretched out his hand and flicked his finger. With a bang, the sword intent exploded. The spiritual sword whined and was bounced off like a dead snake. The man seemed to be struck by lightning, with blood spurting from his mouth and nose. When he was about to escape, Lin Sun pressed his palm and imprisoned him in place. Lin Sun said, If I wanted to kill you, you would be dead at the first moment. The man's face changed, and he said, What do you want to know? He was a smart man. Lin Sun didn't hide and said, You have arrived here long ago. Why don't you pick the herb and leave? Why do you wait here? If I tell you, will you let me go? The man asked. Lin Sun nodded. Look here. The man pointed at the root of the king herb in the crevice. The crimson glow there was resplendent and dazzling to the extreme, but if one looked carefully, one would notice numerous translucent worms that were like grains of sand were lying at the roots of the king medicine, and they were swallowing the essence that the king medicine sprayed out. Lin Sun narrowed his black eyes. There were about a dozen of these insects. They were tiny and covered by the glow. If a practitioner's mind was attracted by the king medicine, he would easily ignore these insects. Before I came, someone discovered this king medicine, but when he tried to pluck it, he strangely began to struggle violently, letting out sinister and mournful screams. In just a few breaths of time, that guy's body was completely devoured, and not even his bones were left. A smear of fear and seriousness appeared on the man's face as he spoke. This was also the reason why he hadn't made a move yet. However, to his surprise, Lin Sun's expression didn't change at all after knowing all this. Lin said casually, "I see. You can go now." The man was even more surprised. "You're not worried that I'll take revenge on you in the future? If I have to worry about revenge every day, how can I cultivate?" Lin Sun glanced at him. The man cupped his hands. "Thank you very much." He turned around and left. On the way, the more he thought about it, the more he felt that something was wrong. After frowning and meditating for a long time, he suddenly patted his forehead and his face suddenly changed. No wonder that guy looked familiar. It was Demon Lin. At the thought of this, he broke out in a cold sweat and fled in a hurry. In front of the cliff, Lin Sun looked at the king medicine carefully, but he didn't pick it. Instead, he asked casually, "Guys, aren't you going to leave?" The surroundings were silent. No one responded. It was as if he was talking to himself. Boom! Lin Sun pressed his palm and fingers in the void. Under the waterfall, the void suddenly collapsed, and a huge rock burst into pieces. Then several figures rushed out. "Demon God Lin, we had our eyes on this king herb first." They were 3 men and 1 woman, obviously from the same force. One of them, a young man in a white robe, looked gloomy and glared at Lin Sun. "Nonsense. Why don't you say that you targeted this immortal burning realm first?" Lin Sun said coldly. "Demon God Lin, once you enter the burning immortal world, you'll be all alone. That mysterious woman behind you won't be able to save you either. Listen to my advice. It's better to keep a low profile. Otherwise, this region of absolute apex will be your burial ground." Another man said proudly, "That's right. Do you still think this is the outside world? Only the descendants of ancient orthodoxies like us can seize good fortune. I'm not afraid to tell you that senior brother Shun Nantian of the Yuan Gathering Spirit Pavilion will be here soon." These descendants from the Yuan Gathering Spirit Pavilion were obviously quite afraid of Lin Sun, but their attitude was still very arrogant, and their words revealed undisguised threats. Especially when the name Shun Nantian was mentioned, they all showed a sense of pride. "Shenantian? I've never heard of him." Lin Sun's voice became cold. "I've already given you a chance. If you don't leave now, don't blame me for being ruthless." These people's faces suddenly became gloomy, and they were angry. "I've long heard that your combat power is superb. Today, I'd like to see if you're really as strong as the rumor says." Suddenly, the white-robed man took a deep breath, and his eyes were full of killing intent. Obviously, he was not willing to leave like this. That king herb was extremely magical, and it could be regarded as a small opportunity. Plop! However, as soon as he stood up, he was hit away by Lin Sun's palm and fell on the ground more than 30 meters away, coughing up blood. The others were dumbfounded. They didn't expect that their companion would be so weak. He was hit away so easily, and he didn't even have the strength to resist. "Get out!" Lin Sun's patience had been worn out, and he issued an ultimatum. "Just you wait. Those who offend the Yuan Gathering Spirit Pavilion will not end well." In the end, these people left dejectedly, and they didn't forget to leave some harsh words before leaving. A bunch of good-for-nothings will be eliminated sooner or later. Lin Sun laughed and didn't bother to pay attention to them. He looked at the king herb again, and then couldn't help sighing and muttering, "I don't know whether I'm lucky or that little guy is too lucky." Then, Little Silver appeared in the air with his arms crossed, and a touch of coldness and pride appeared on his handsome little face. "Master, Are you in trouble again? I've said long ago that I will never fight with some inferior trash. Lin Sun's lips twitched. This boy was really as proud as before. He pointed to the king herb. If you don't like it, I'll take it away. Little Silver was stunned at first, and then his eyes suddenly brightened. He suddenly cheered, and there was no trace of coldness and pride, but he was like a child. He opened his mouth and sucked sharply. Suddenly, more than a dozen transparent bugs lying at the root of the king herb trembled all over, and then were swept up and swallowed by Little Silver. Little Silver showed an intoxicated and happy smile. Lin Sun couldn't help saying, "These are all your kind. You just eat them like this?" Yes, these bugs lying at the root of this king herb were all spirit-eating bugs. In the outside world, except for Little Silver, they were almost extinct, but now they appeared in this domain of absolute summit. When Lin Sun first saw it, he was also a little shocked and surprised. He had to admit that this domain of absolute summit was really too magical. No, I'm a royal. They haven't shed wisdom, so they can only be reduced to food to help me transform and evolve. If I don't have wisdom, I'm doomed to be food. This is the nature of my spirit-eating bugs. Little Silver shook his head and explained. Lin Sun suddenly understood. This is when Little Silver looked at the king herb. He suddenly opened his eyes wide, as if he couldn't believe it. Spirit calming flower? Whoosh! Before his voice died away, Little Silver rushed over. Instead of devouring it, he uprooted the flower and carefully put it away, his eyebrows full of joy. Lin Sun coughed dryly. Little Silver was stunned and immediately said solemnly, "Thank you for giving me such a great opportunity, Master. With this spirit-calming flower, I can have a little more chance to transform into a king. If you have any orders in the future, I will go through fire and water for you." Lin Sun was very satisfied. It was not good to be too cold and arrogant. Immediately, he asked curiously, "A spirit-calming flower can only give you a little more chance?" Little Silver's path of transformation was different from that of cultivators. Now he could only be regarded as a larva with the qualification of a latent king. But even so, he was extremely powerful. If he could transform into a bug king, it could be imagined that it would not be impossible for him to kill old monsters in the king realm. The rarest thing was that the attack of spirit-eating bugs was absolutely impossible to guard against. Little Silver nodded and then said, "If Master can help me collect more spirit-calming flowers, I will have a greater chance to advance to the king realm." Lin Sun said grumpily, "Do you think king herbs are cabbages that can be picked at will?" Silver swept the surroundings with his gaze and said, "Master, everything is possible in the region of extinction. There's a brand related to the region of extinction in my memories as well. Unfortunately, it's been sealed, and it can only be opened when one advances into the king realm." Lin Sun was instantly moved. Old Toad was an ancient freak. Could it be that Little Silver was also one? That was really possible. After all, according to Xiaohao of the Nether Star Imperial family, spirit-eating bugs should have been extinct in ancient times. But Little Silver came back to life, and his memory was sealed, almost like Old Toad's. What was the difference between him and an ancient freak? In the end, Lin Sun agreed to help Little Silver keep an eye on the spirit-calming flower, and the little guy happily returned to his sea of consciousness with a much more intimate attitude than before. Of course, he still couldn't change his cold and arrogant nature. "I have to go to the ancient city of immortals as soon as possible." Lin Sun took a deep breath, got rid of distracting thoughts, and decided to temporarily give up the plan of searching for opportunities alone. He would go to the ancient city of immortals to meet Old Toad and Alu. Although anyone below the king realm could enter the field of extinction, it was possible to become a king in the field of extinction. Lin Sun wasn't afraid of competing with any peers, but once someone set foot in the king realm, even if he wasn't a peak king realm expert, he would definitely be a great threat. Chapter 1148. Currently, there were tens of millions of cultivators who had entered the Apex region. Even though they were all cultivators below the king realm, none of them dared to slack off, because a king realm expert would be born at any moment. It was common knowledge that only some supreme geniuses had a chance to compete for the king realm. But why had those ancient sects sent out so many disciples? The reason was very easy to guess. Perhaps some of these disciples were unable to become a king realm expert, but they possessed the qualifications to advance into the king realm. It could be foreseen that it wouldn't be long before many new kings of the younger generation would be born, and then they would rely on their higher cultivation to crush their opponents. Time was of the essence. Even though the apex region would close in 10 years, no one could slack off, because danger was everywhere, and the competition was bound to be extremely brutal. Lin Sun had entered the apex region for the sake of becoming a king. However, he sought the king realm, and the path he took was different from the world. So, it was bound to be difficult to become a king. The life and death realm was the king realm. For cultivators, becoming a king was equivalent to transcending the 5 realms and breaking the shackles of life and death. It had a far-reaching influence that surpassed the past, and it was related to one's future achievements on the path to immortality. Lin Sun had decided a long time ago that he wouldn't follow the path of his predecessors. He intended to establish a path of his own and compete with the sages of the past and present. Moreover, according to the mysterious woman, the king realm determined the path to becoming a sage in the future. If he didn't take this step well, then his future achievements were bound to be limited. Now that Lin Sun had arrived at the immortal world, his top priority was to meet up with Old Toad and Alu, and then search for fortune to prepare for attaining the king realm. Swoosh! The boundless mountains and rivers were scarlet red. Lin Sun identified the direction and started on his way. The immortal world was one of the 3,000 worlds of the apex region, and it was like an enormous and boundless small world. All along the way, Lin Sun encountered many cultivators who were in a hurry. Obviously, they were making the best use of their time to search for fortune and fortune. A wave of intense sounds of battle came from afar. A group of cultivators were fighting to the point the mountains and rivers dimmed, and the heavens and the earth were dazzling. They were fighting for an ancient stone well that ceaselessly emanated dazzling flames and surging divine radiance. It was an extremely shocking sight. There was no doubt that fortune was definitely hidden at the bottom of the stone well. Lin Sun just glanced at it and kept moving away. All along the way, he'd already encountered numerous similar conflicts and battles, and they were fighting for nothing more than spirit herbs, precious treasures, divine materials, and some miraculous treasures. All of these could be considered as good fortune, and they were fortuitous encounters that could only be chanced upon in the outside world. However, it wasn't very attractive to Lin Sun. He'd already reached the end of his cultivation path, and what he needed was a great fortune that would allow him to reach the Extinction King realm. 2 days passed quickly. Whoosh! When Lin passed by a fiery river, a big fish suddenly rushed out of the river and opened its mouth to bite him. This huge fish was about 3 meters long, and its entire body was as red as jade. It had dragon whiskers and a scale tail and a pair of strange flaming wings on both sides. Boom! It was extremely powerful. When it rushed over, a fiery multicolored glow overflowed, and even space itself was set ablaze. Within its open, bloody mouth, sharp teeth that were like halberds flickered with terrifying cold light. Bang! Lin Sun's figure flashed and easily avoided the attack. A low hill behind him was instantly melted by the fiery glow on the fiery red fish and turned into nothing. At the same time, Lin Sun flashed over and punched out, showing a shocking scene that could shake the world. The fiery red fish didn't dodge. It swung its tail and blocked Lin Sun's punch. This moved Lin Sun. It should be noted that with his current strength, a casual punch was enough to kill a junior tycoon. Even a peerless giant didn't dare to fight with Lin Sun. But now this fiery red fish blocked it. Interesting. Come on. Lin Sun rushed forward with ice drake steps. His whole body was shining like a demon, and he was deducing the 9 strikes of shaking heaven. Soon, the fiery red fish couldn't resist Lin Sun's punch, and its scales began to peel off continuously. Whoosh! Suddenly, the fiery red fish seemed to sense that something was wrong. It decisively slipped away and rushed towards the fiery river at an extremely fast speed. Lin Sun followed it closely. To his surprise, the strange fiery red fish's figure suddenly shrunk to the size of a palm, and it dodged his attack without mishap and rushed into the river. Plop! The fiery red waves splashed, and when he looked at the fiery red fish again, it had already disappeared. Lin Sun felt a little embarrassed to let a fish escape from his hand. When he was about to catch up with it, a sudden palpitation appeared in his heart. It seemed that there was some great horror hidden under the fiery river. Lin Sun immediately stopped and stepped back. He spread out his spiritual awareness to explore the river. In an instant, a strange picture was reflected in his mind. Thousands of meters below the river, there was a mysterious bronze gate, which was engraved with mottled Taoist patterns and shone with a strange luster. Beside the bronze door stood a stone pillar with a thick and translucent fiery red chain wrapped around it. The other end of the chain was tied to a stone statue of a fierce beast. The fierce beast was like a dragon, with its body entrenched at the bottom of the river. It was as thick as a mountain, vivid and lifelike. As soon as Lin Sun's spiritual awareness touched the stone statue of the fierce beast, he felt a chill in his heart and stiff all over, feeling an inexplicable depression and fear. Clatter! Almost at the same time, the stone statue of the fierce beast seemed to come to life, emitting a terrible evil spirit, which made the river suddenly boil and roar. However, before this fiendish aura could spread, it was suppressed by the fiery red chains that bound the fierce beast statue. Those chains were shining, sparkling, and resplendent. Mysterious symbols appeared, viciously suppressing this stone statue's baleful energy. Lin Sun was shocked. Under a river, there was a bronze gate. On one side of the gate, there was a stone statue of a fierce beast bound by a mysterious chain. What was hidden in the bronze gate? Was the stone statue of the ferocious beast suppressed here to guard this bronze door? After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun decided to leave. This place was too dangerous and strange for him to explore now. If he entered rashly, he might have an accident and be killed. I didn't expect that there was such a dangerous place in the absolute summit domain. Maybe I can enter it when I reach the King Realm. Lin Sun vaguely felt that there might be something hidden in the bronze gate. A big black bird approached stealthily with a black pot in its claws. It came to Lin Sun's back silently, aimed the black pot at the back of Lin Sun's head, and then suddenly raised. But at this moment, Lin Sun suddenly turned around. Whoosh! The raised black pot spun in the void and naturally buckled on the back of the big black bird. Then it raised its head, coughed dryly, and said calmly, "Huh, little brother, we meet again." Lin Sun smiled faintly. "It's you. Why do you like to take the blame as much as before?" "Like to take the blame?" The big black bird was stunned for a moment, and then laughed dryly. It glanced around and said, "Little brother, I have something to do. I'll go first." Before its voice died away, the big black bird spread its wings and rushed into the void at an incredible speed, as if it was teleporting. "Black, don't go." Almost at the same time, Lin Sun rose into the air and operated ice dragon steps to the extreme. He raised his hand and punched directly at the blackbird. This blackbird was not simple at all. In the dilapidated ancient temple under the whirlpool of the Boundary River, it looked like a black phoenix, with dark wings like the eternal night and wisps of strange Buddha aura diffusing. It was regarded as a Buddha fetus, sleeping in a Buddhist shrine, and later awakened by Mu Zheng, one of the 18 disciples of the earthly treasury temple, with a secret method. According to Mu Zheng, this big black bird was an unprecedented Buddha fetus, which was probably left by the solitary saint. Lin Sun still clearly remembered that the big black bird carried a black pot and knocked out Mu Zheng, the top figure of the earthly treasury temple, with a few simple and violent blows. Moreover, this bird was extremely wretched and insidious, and liked to sneak up on people. If Lin Sun hadn't noticed it in advance, he would have been hit on the back of the head with a black pot. Boom! In the distance, The big black bird flapped its wings and burned with strange black Buddha fire, melting Lin Sun's punch. I win people by virtue, and I don't like to fight. But if you fight again, don't blame me for killing you. The big black bird said in a ruffian tone. I won't fight you if you stay. Lin Sun smiled. While talking, the two did not stop. One chased, and the other chased at an extremely fast speed, competing in the void. Damn it, you robbed the fortune left by Du Ji. It's good enough that I didn't make a fuss about it. What else do you want? The big black bird said impatiently. Lin Sun said seriously, That's why I think it's necessary for us to talk. Maybe I will return the fortune to you. There was still a piece of scorched Bodhi wood in his hand, which sealed an extremely horrible and supreme golden power. According to Lin Sun's speculation, the big black bird must know some secrets that outsiders couldn't know since it had been sleeping in the Buddha niche in the ancient temple. Return to me. The big black bird was stunned and then burst into laughter. This fortune involves the forbidden way. I don't care about it. What if I die like Du Ji in the future? After that, it seemed to take slight pleasure in Chun Shi's misfortune and said, Little brother, I advise you to be more careful. The 18 disciples of the Kitagarbha temple and an ancient Buddha that had been silent since the ancient times until now have already entered the apex region, whereas you've been taken to be the number one heretic by these bald donkeys. As soon as it finished speaking, the big black bird had already soared into the sky, and its speed was much faster. It disappeared without a trace like teleportation. Lin Sun stopped, knowing that he could not catch up with it. The successor of the earthly treasury temple, the number one heretic? Lin Sun raised his eyebrows. He was not afraid, but a little confused. What did the big blackbird mean? Was it because he had obtained the tranquility scripture left by Saint Du Ji and Black Phoenix, so he was targeted by the earthly treasury temple? And who was that Gufuzi? Chapter 1149. After thinking for a while, Lin Sun shook his head and moved on. No matter who Gufuzi was, Lin Sun wouldn't mind killing anyone who dared to be his enemy in the absolute domain. The immortal burning domain was so vast that it was covered in a fiery red scene. Mountains, rivers, and the earth seemed to be burning. Even the sky was dyed a magnificent crimson red. However, it wasn't hot. Along the way, Lin Sun met more and more cultivators who were heading in the same direction. Through their conversation, Lin Sun learned that they were heading for the immortal burning ancient city, just like him. Obviously, after entering the immortal burning domain, the descendants of all the ancient forces were moved to different areas. This meant that only after entering the immortal burning ancient city could the descendants of those forces gather together and take action. Of course, there were also solitary cultivators who had absolute confidence in their own strength, or were rogue cultivators with very low cultivation who entered the absolute domain purely to try their luck. Boom! In the sky, several golden crows flashed through the sky. Their wings were golden and brilliant, and they released a myriad of flames and divine radiance that burned even space itself. It was as if several suns were moving about. Hurry up! The target is heading for the immortal burning ancient city. The seventh prince has ordered us to capture this man. Is it Demon Lin? You'll know when you get there. The golden crows had obviously just gathered together and were flying towards the distant sky while talking. They didn't conceal their conversation and seemed unscrupulous. It could be seen that these golden crows were very confident and didn't fear being heard by others. Lin Sun's black eyes were filled with cold light. These golden crows were obviously going to deal with someone, but they mentioned him in their conversation. Do you plan to treat me as an enemy if I don't cooperate with you? Lin Sun's killing intent flashed in his heart. He roughly judged that Wu Lingfei, the seventh prince of Golden Crow, must have cooperated with Ling Hua Fairy and regarded him as an enemy. Whoosh! Without hesitation, Lin Sun suddenly rushed up at an extremely fast speed. His figure was like an ice dragon, flying between the vast heaven and earth. Although there are millions of cultivators entering the immortal burning domain, most of them are vulnerable cannon fodder. There are only a dozen or so forces that can fight against our Golden Crow bloodline. A golden crow powerhouse said arrogantly in the air. Based on the specific division, the power of my golden crow bloodline is more than enough to hold an absolute advantage in the immortal burning realm. At the very least, we can rank in the top 3. What's laughable is that Fiend Celestial Lin doesn't know what's good for him despite 7th Crown Prince's invitation. He insists on making things difficult for 7th Crown Prince. How foolish is that? This fellow isn't stupid, he's just too arrogant. In the outside world, he's already renowned for his audacity, and this is something that everyone in the world knows about. Unfortunately, he's mistaken something this time. The region of absolute peaks can't be compared to the outside world, and no one can save him if someone wants to kill him. The others also chimed in. That's right. No one who dares to go against our Golden Crow bloodline has ever had a good ending. Who is the 7th Prince's target this time? At this time, someone suddenly asked. The leader of the Golden Crow tribe said, "We will know when we arrive at the immortal incineration ancient city." After that, he was stunned as he suddenly realized that something was off. The person that asked that question wasn't one of his companions at all. At the same time, the other Golden Crow tribe also came to their senses and looked into the distance. A tall and handsome young man in a moon-white robe had already appeared in front of them at some point in time. Fiend Celestial Lin. The Golden Crow tribe's expressions changed slightly. Even though they despised and disdained Lin's son, they had to admit that Fiend Celestial Lin was extraordinarily powerful. He was a ruthless man who could suppress the ancient freaks. What do you want? Someone shouted, but his voice was fierce in appearance. I want to ask you some questions. If you cooperate, I will let you go. If you don't, I haven't tasted Golden Crow meat yet, but I don't mind trying it. As he spoke, Lin's son stepped forward. His black eyes were cold, and he looked at them as if he was looking at a group of ingredients. All of these Golden Crow experts felt a chill run down their spines, and they felt both furious and fearful in their hearts. They had witnessed the scene of Lin Sun eating the cyan scale heavenly eagle in front of the City of Guidance. Are you going to make an enemy of the Golden Crow bloodline? I advise you not to do so. Otherwise, if the 7th Prince finds out, he will never forgive you. A powerhouse shouted. Lin Sun didn't even bother to talk nonsense. He attacked directly and cut the Gordian knot, unwilling to waste time. Boom! Waves of fist energy burst forth, crushing the void like a dragon soaring into the sky. Immediately, screams and roars sounded. The Golden Crow tribe's powerhouses tried their best to resist, but how could they? In an instant, a Golden Crow tribe's powerhouse was killed. Bang! His body exploded, his feathers withered, and a rain of blood poured down from the void. Some cultivators passing by in the distance were shocked when they saw this. Someone actually dared to kill the powerhouses of the Golden Crow bloodline, but when they saw Lin Sun's appearance, they were all surprised. It was Fiend Celestial Lin. This was easy to understand. Kill. The Golden Crow tribe's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. They each took out their secret arts and treasures. Divine light blazed, and the flames were like a sea of fire as they fought Lin Sun with all their might. Swish! Lin Sun's figure disappeared from where he stood. He was too fast and erratic, like an ice dragon traversing through the clouds. When he appeared again, his palms and fingers glowed, and he punched a Golden Crow tribe's body, causing it to explode. Bastard, you actually dared to be so ruthless. Just wait to be annihilated. A woman let out a sharp cry, and she was agitated to the point of being on the verge of going mad. She raised her hand and withdrew a golden and brilliant flaming umbrella, and it emitted a dazzling light as it suppressed Lin Sun. The gilded flaming umbrella was a unique treasure refined by the Golden Crow bloodline. When the umbrella opened up, it was like the curtain of the heavens had descended, and flames poured out from within it, as if heavenly flames were about to descend into the world. On the other hand, the ribs of the umbrella were refined with samadhi true flames, and they were like pillars of fire that could hold up the heavens. They were dazzling like gold, and they possessed ferocious and overbearing might. However, to everyone's shock, Lin Sun's palm swept out, and the all-powerful Tao of water transformed into a sharp blade that sliced off the umbrella's ribs. After that, he pressed down forcefully, and a bang resounded as the umbrella's surface exploded into pieces. Pooh! The woman had just intended to dodge when a swany seal smashed on her body, causing her flesh to split apart, and she perished on the spot. In the blink of an eye, 3 Golden Crow tribe experts had perished. They were killed by Lin Sun without any difficulty, and he seemed to be in an extremely sorry state. On the other hand, such overbearing methods of slaughter caused the bodies of many cultivators in the distance to tremble. He was too ferocious, and he deserved to be called Fiend Celestial Lin. Whoosh! When the last Golden Crow tribe expert saw that the situation wasn't good, he transformed into a golden crow, flapped his wings, and swiftly fled into the distance. Lin Sun stretched out his hand and grabbed, and the invisible power of Basha prohibition spread out like a net of the Great Way. It directly imprisoned the Golden Crow and pulled him back. The Golden Crow tribe expert was just about to cry out when he was knocked out by Lin Sun with a slap, and he became prey and was carried in his hand. Then, Lin Sun glanced at the cultivators around him, and his figure flashed as he quickly disappeared from the scene. He really intends to eat the Golden Crow's meat? Some cultivators gasped. Fiend Celestial Lin's appetite was too big. Wasn't he afraid of being scalded? In a ravine with crimson rocks, there was no one around. There was no torture. When the captured Golden Crow tribe expert woke up from his coma, he directly revealed the secret. It turned out that their targets this time were Old Toad and Alu. This was an order from Wu Lingfei, the 7th prince of the Golden Crow tribe. He wanted to capture the 2 of them alive, to threaten Lin Sun to submit and obey his orders. Why do you want to make things difficult for me? Lin Sun frowned. He had no grievances with them, but Wu Lingfei obviously had his eyes on him and was secretly carrying out some despicable actions. The Golden Crow sneered. How can you be so naive, Fiend Celestial Lin? This is the absolute domain. If you're not a friend, you are an enemy. There is no third choice. Ridiculous. There are 3,000 worlds in the absolute domain, and tens of millions of strong people have arrived here. If they're not friends with the Golden Crow tribe, will they all be killed by you? Lin Sun was very clear that the reason couldn't be so simple. Unfortunately, the identity of the Golden Crow tribe expert was obviously not qualified to understand Wu Lingfei's thoughts, and it was destined that he couldn't give Lin Sun the answer he wanted. If you kill me, your friend won't be able to live either. The man was very calm and said coldly, without fear. Lin Sun smiled slightly. With a crack, he directly twisted the guy's neck. At the moment of his death, he looked incredibly shocked. It seemed that he didn't expect that Lin Sun would be so straightforward and had no awareness of being threatened at all. Even if I don't kill you, it's impossible for Wu Lingfei to give up. It's better to kill you, and then I can have a good meal and taste the meat of the Golden Crow. Lin Sun said to himself. In his heart, there was already a murderous intent. Wu Lingfei, the 7th prince of the Golden Crow tribe, regarded Lin Sun as an enemy, but he also wanted to kill Old Toad and Alu, which had already touched Lin Sun's reverse scale. Before long, Lin Sun stuffed the corpse of a golden crow into the storage ring and left the canyon. 2 days later, along the way, more and more cultivators were seen. In the void, there were dazzling lights and rainbows everywhere. But at the same time, the conflicts and killings between them became more and more frequent. In this apex region, strength was respected, and anyone would stop at nothing for the sake of seizing fortune. And such a shady business would never be stopped. Even if some weak cultivators obtained opportunities and fates, they would be forced to hand them over as long as they were targeted. Otherwise, they were doomed to die. On the way, Lin Sun also learned that there were many spiritual medicines and spiritual materials in this world, so it was not strange to pick king medicines. If one was lucky enough to get some rare treasures like the longevity fruit, it was not impossible for him to step into the king realm in one step. Millions of cultivators gathered in the immortal burning realm alone. They also needed to exchange needed spiritual medicines, immortal materials, and some clues of cave residences and treasures. And the place of exchange was in the immortal burning ancient city. In short, this city was like a stronghold for all cultivators to exchange. Here we are, several hours later. Lin Sun saw the outline of a city on the horizon in the distance, stretching between heaven and earth. Chapter 1150. The ancient city was towering and occupied a vast area. The city walls were fiery red, magnificent and magnificent. According to Old Toad, when the absolute peak domain appeared in ancient times, the ancient cities in every world had already existed, and their ages couldn't be traced back. Every ancient city was like a stronghold. When the absolute peak domain appeared, the city would soon become lively, and cultivators from all over the world would gather here to communicate. Although it was called communication, it was actually an exchange of fortunes and opportunities that they had obtained. After all, the fortunes that each cultivator needed were different, and not everyone could get the fortune they wanted. However, they could trade in this city. Swish, Lin Sun turned into an ordinary man, and then approached the ancient city of burning immortals in the distance. Before he arrived, he could see that there were countless powerful auras lingering in the ancient city, shaking the sky and clouds. Obviously, many strong cultivators had already gathered in the city, and the powerful auras they exuded caused such a strange phenomenon. Whoosh, like Lin Sun, at this time, in the void from all directions, densely packed figures of practitioners were rushing towards the city at full speed. Have you heard that someone sold a greenwood Dao fruit yesterday, which attracted attention from all directions? On the way, people were discussing, "My God, is there really such a divine thing in this world? Not a legend?" Many people were restless. Lin Sun was also surprised. The Dao fruit contained the original power of the Great Way. After swallowing one could directly control a kind of power of the Great Way without comprehending it. For example, this greenwood Dao fruit contained the profound way of wood. As long as a cultivator swallowed it, he could master the great way of wood in one fell swoop. This is a great fortune. Who bought it in the end? Someone asked, "Hey, how can we let others know about this kind of transaction?" But I can tell you clearly that if you don't have enough strength and dare to sell such a heaven-defying fortune, you'll definitely be targeted, and it is very likely that you will lose your life. Many people were shocked. This was the absolute peak domain, not the outside world. Everything depended on one's combat strength. If one didn't have enough combat strength, even if he obtained heaven-defying fortune, it would be a disaster rather than a blessing. On the way, Lin Sun also learned that the real, peerless figures and ancient freaks didn't have to bother to look for opportunities at all. Their attendance would help them search for all kinds of natural treasures. In this way, these peerless figures and ancient freaks only had to concentrate on cultivating, and only an extremely heaven-defying fortuitous encounter would draw them to take action. Remember, killing is forbidden in the city. If you have any grudges, you can only find another place to settle them. This is the rule. Otherwise, you will be suppressed by the various forces. Before entering the city, Lin Sun learned some so-called rules. Humph! This is only a rule that binds the weak. For those who are truly at the peak, there are no restrictions at all. Someone sneered. No, you're wrong. Even if it's a peerless figure, he's bound to not dare incur public wrath. After all, the heirs of numerous great powers reside within the city, and every single power has a peerless figure holding down the fort. Unless one is tired of living, no one is willing to become a public enemy. Lin Sun walked into the city while listening. The city was a vast world of its own, emitting a faint red luster, ancient and auspicious. Every building exuded mottled ancient charm. The city was very lively, with endless figures of cultivators. Some buildings had already been occupied by the great forces who had arrived in advance. Some weak people could only live on the streets. A piece of refined fire iron, only for fairy talisman green light grass. I have an incomplete map of a treasured place in my hand, and I need 7 peerless figures to explore it together. Anyone who wants to explore it, please come and sign up quickly. I want to buy all kinds of king medicines at a high price. On the road, there were stalls everywhere, and the shouts were endless. What made Lin Sun speechless was that some ancient buildings had been directly transformed into various shops, and even pawn shops and auction houses. Then, Lin Sun laughed at himself. He was making a fuss about nothing. Anyone under the King realm was qualified to enter the peerless domain. In this way, all kinds of people would pour in. Some people took risks to explore opportunities, while others waited in the city to buy and trade. Everyone took what they needed. Sorry to disturb you, but do you know where the Golden Crow Branch is based? Lin Sun asked a cultivator on the way. It was a young man in a silver robe. He was slightly stunned, and then said, "Do you also plan to join the Golden Crow Branch?" Before Lin Sun answered, he said enthusiastically, "To tell you the truth, I also plan to go to the Golden Crow Branch. Why don't we go together?" Lin Sun nodded and said, "Okay." On the way, Lin Sun learned that in the 5 or 6 days since he entered the peerless domain, many weak rogue cultivators could only rely on the descendants of the great forces in order to seek opportunities. The young man in a silver robe also planned to do so. His name was Wang Dong, the descendant of a small force. In fact, in the eyes of the ancient orthodoxies, the descendants of small forces like him were no different from rogue cultivators. I arrived yesterday, and I've already headed to the territory of the Golden Crow clan. Unfortunately, there are too many cultivators that have gone to seek refuge with the Golden Crow clan. I've been queuing for an entire day, yet I haven't had my turn. Wang Dong sighed. It was too difficult for a practitioner from a small sect like him to rise up. Even if he entered the peerless domain, he could only rely on the great forces if he wanted to obtain opportunities. "My fellow practitioner, it's over there." Wang Dong pointed into the distance. There was an ancient palace there. It was tall and majestic, and it exuded a majestic aura. At this moment, there were many practitioners waiting there. On both sides of the palace gate, there were 2 strong practitioners of the Golden Crow Branch guarding. "Alas, I have to line up again." Wang Dong sighed, and then said, "By the way, joining the camp of the Golden Crow Branch requires an offering." "Offering?" Lin Sun was stunned. "It's a fee. It can be treasures, spiritual materials, and spiritual medicines," Wang Dong explained patiently. Lin Sun couldn't help frowning. Relying on others meant that one could only be reduced to the role of cannon fodder. Now, if he wanted to be cannon fodder, he had to pay an offering. The behavior of the Golden Crow Branch was too ugly. "You want to join the camp of the Golden Crow Branch with just a blue-silver snowstone? Get out of here." In front of the palace, a strong practitioner of the Golden Crow Branch suddenly shouted. He had an aquiline nose and thin lips, which made him look mean and cold. He raised his hand and slapped the practitioner at the front of the line away. His arrogance was very arrogant. It was undoubtedly a humiliation to slap a practitioner in the face. But the people present seemed to be used to it. They looked numb and didn't have any reaction. Next, another strong practitioner of the Golden Crow Branch said expressionlessly. A cultivator at the front of the queue immediately walked forward and respectfully withdrew a jade box with a face filled with anticipation. "My friend, what are you doing?" Wang Dong was shocked. Seeing Lin Sun walking towards the palace in the distance, Wang Dong didn't intend to line up at all. "Listen to my advice. Cultivate your mind first. If you entrust your cultivation to others, your achievements are bound to be limited," Lin Sun reminded. Unexpectedly, Wang Dong was stunned and said disapprovingly, "That's true, but who can do it? What's more, aren't you also here to rely on us? Are you qualified to teach me a lesson?" Wang Dong didn't say this out loud. He had a good impression of Lin Sun and didn't want to speak ill of him. Hearing this, Lin Sun couldn't help sighing in his heart. He shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Everyone had his own choice and couldn't be forced. "What are you doing? If you want to join the noble camp of the Golden Crow Branch, wait in the back obediently." What was ridiculous was that when Lin Sun went straight to the palace, those practitioners who were waiting in line were unhappy and shouted at him. Wang Dong was anxious and also shouted from behind, "My friend, come back quickly. Anyone who jumps the queue will have a bad end." Lin Sun turned a deaf ear to him. A thin young man who was waiting in line suddenly rushed out and stood in front of Lin Sun, shouting, "What an inconsiderate guy! Don't you see where you are? How dare you behave atrociously? On the surface, the thin young man didn't like Lin Sun's behavior, but in fact, he wanted to show his loyalty in front of the strong practitioners of the Golden Crow branch and hoped to be selected. Seeing this, other practitioners in line couldn't help but feel annoyed. A good opportunity to show off had been taken by someone else. Boom! In a flash, as soon as the thin young man rushed out, he slapped his palm towards Lin Sun's chest. The palm was fierce, and it burst forth with Taoist light. This made the two strong practitioners of the Golden Crow branch at the entrance of the palace nod to themselves, and they made a decision in their hearts to give the thin young man a chance to join them. They couldn't bury his loyalty. At the same time, they could also set an example for others to tell the world that so long as one served the branch of the Golden Crow branch wholeheartedly, he would definitely be valued. Bang! However, to everyone's surprise, as soon as the thin young man slapped out with his palm, he was shaken to the point of flying back fiercely. His right arm was broken, and he rolled on the ground and let out a shrill scream. From the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't move at all and just continued to move forward. The atmosphere in the field suddenly became silent, and the practitioners in line looked at Lin Sun with a trace of surprise and bewilderment in their eyes. This guy's strength was really good, but what on earth did he want to do? Could it be that he wants to take this opportunity to show off in order to win the recognition of the noble seniors of the branch of the Golden Crow branch? Someone muttered. When the others heard this, they thought to themselves that this was a good way to show off because it was easier to stand out than waiting in line painstakingly. As expected, the man with a hooked nose from the branch of the Golden Crow said, "Your strength isn't bad. You're qualified to not line up. Hand over your tribute and serve me from now on." He looked Lin Sun up and down and seemed to be very satisfied. As for the injured thin young man, he'd been completely ignored by him. As soon as these words came out, all the practitioners in line felt jealous and sighed endlessly. Why didn't they think of doing this? On the other hand, Wang Dong was stunned and opened his eyes wide. Could it be done in this way? Chapter 11:51. Lin Sun was also slightly stunned, with a strange look on his face. "What are you waiting for? Hand over your tribute," the hook-nosed man frowned. Everyone was curious and craned their necks to see what Lin Sun's tribute was. After thinking for a moment, Lin Sun took out a golden claw, which was like a club. The claw was sharp, shining with cold light and surging with flames. What claw is this? Why does it look like the claw of a flame gold crane? Someone was stunned and surprised. Flame gold crane? It's a chicken claw, someone muttered. What's the point of this tribute? It's too shabby. A chicken claw? It's amazing that it's so huge. Many people laughed with a playful look. But to their surprise, when they saw the claw, the two guards in front of the palace almost dropped their eyes out. They looked incredulous. They were even trembling all over. It's just a chicken claw, yet it's able to make two esteemed lords so excited. Could it be that this chicken claw has a great origin? A practitioner was stunned. Crack! As soon as he finished speaking, he received a slap on his face. A mouthful of teeth flew out along with blood, and his face was cracked. He spun around on the spot before stumbling and falling to the ground. His mind was in a daze. The whole audience was silent and stiff because they all saw that it was the hook-nosed man of Golden Crow who slapped him. At this moment, his face was livid, and the blue veins on his forehead were bulging. His face was as ugly as it could be. Everyone was dumbfounded. Was it necessary for him to do this for a chicken claw? Some people also noticed that something was wrong. It was very strange. "Is this tribute okay?" Lin Sun asked. "Who are you? How dare you kill the strong of my clan?" The hook-nosed man took a deep breath and restrained the surging killing intent in his heart. As the saying went, those with good intentions don't come. It was very abnormal that the young man dared to come alone, which made the hook-nosed man feel a little unusual. At this time, the crowd became restless and their faces became extremely strange. Finally, they realized that it was not a chicken claw or a flame gold crane claw, but a piece of Golden Crow claw that had been cut off. Who was this guy? How dare he do this? Everyone's hearts trembled, and they felt indescribable shock. In the distance, Wang Dong was completely dumbfounded. This friend that he had met by chance seemed to be here to cause trouble. That was the bloodline of the Gold Crow. Was he crazy? He had to admit that Wang Dong was a nice guy. Although it was the first time they met, Wang Dong subconsciously worried about Lin Sun when he saw this scene. Who I am is not important. I only want to ask you one thing. Have you seen these two people before? Lin Sun made a stroke with his fingers, and a light screen emerged, showing the images of Old Toad and Alu. The hook-nosed man was startled at first, and then his expression changed slightly. You are... Before he finished his words, Lin Sun grabbed his neck and lifted him up. You just need to tell me whether you've seen them or not. Not good. Someone is looking for trouble. On the other side of the hall, the powerful golden crow bird let out a thunderous roar. Bang! Lin Sun stretched out his hand and clapped, and a terrifying force of the great way rose up. Before the golden crow could react, he was killed on the spot, and his body was smashed into pieces. A single strike shocked everyone present. The cultivators that were lining up nearby cried out involuntarily from shock, and they dodged and fled in panic. It was a rule that forbade killing in the immortal burning ancient city. Whoever dared to violate it would be regarded as a public enemy by all the major forces. But Lin Sun dared to trample on the rules and kill people in the territory of the golden crow bird. This was too frightening. As long as one wasn't stupid, he could see that Lin Sun was a ruthless person. Why don't you run away after killing them? Wang Dong shouted in the distance. Why should I run away? Lin Sun said casually. Then he exerted strength in his palm and fingers, and the hook-nosed man's neck was almost broken, making it difficult for him to breathe. I'll ask you one last time. Have you seen them? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, like a whirlpool abyss, emitting a terrifying force. The hook-nosed man felt dizzy as if he was about to sink. He nodded subconsciously. Were they? Lin Sun's heart sank. Had Wu Lingfei already captured Old Toad and Alu? If it was true, it was absolutely bad news. But before the hook-nosed man could answer, more than a dozen figures rushed out of the magnificent palace, including men and women. Obviously, they were all alarmed. What gall, daring to come to our golden crow bloodline to cause trouble? Someone shouted. Suddenly, the hook-nosed man came to himself. When he was about to warn Lin Sun, his neck was broken by Lin Sun with a crack, and he died directly. You're courting death. Those men and women were all descendants of the Golden Crow branch. They were all top figures among their peers. Seeing someone commit murder in front of their eyes, they immediately became furious. I'm here to find someone. How can it be called making trouble? Lin Sun looked indifferent. He quickly put away the corpse of the Golden Crow in his hand, which was an ingredient he had never tasted before. His action made many people's faces darken. Lin Sun killed their clansmen and didn't even spare the corpse. He deserved to die. Do you know where you are? Aren't you afraid of losing your life? A black-robed young man with a long and narrow face said coldly. He sensed something was wrong, so he stopped the people around him and didn't take action immediately. According to the rules, killing was forbidden in the ancient city of immortal burning. Even the top figures didn't dare to do it easily, for it would offend the orthodoxies. But now, a young man came alone and killed people without hesitation. He was either crazy or he didn't care about breaking the rules at all. You just need to tell me where they are now. Lin Sun asked again as he outlined the light screens of Old Toad and Alu with his fingertips. Instantly, the black-robed young man and the others changed their faces and shouted, You're a demon, Lin? Obviously, they had all seen Old Toad and Alu, so they guessed Lin Sun's identity in an instant. In the distance, many practitioners had already gathered, as well as the powerhouses of other orthodoxies. After all, the noise here was too big. When they heard the name Demon Lin, many people's faces changed abruptly and they couldn't help gasping. Since you know it's me, you should know why I'm here. Tell Wu Lingfei to come out. If he doesn't give me an explanation today, I don't mind killing. As Lin Sun spoke, his appearance had returned to normal. It was really him. Everyone was dumbfounded. However, they still couldn't imagine why Demon Lin dared to kill people in the city. Wasn't he afraid of becoming the public enemy of all the major forces? The black-robed young man and the others' faces changed constantly. They didn't expect Lin Sun to show up in such a way and kill them all by himself. Lin Sun, others may be afraid of you, but we of Golden Crow are not. I'm not afraid to tell you that the seventh prince of our family is about to come out and kill you as easily as killing a chicken. You're courting death by provoking us now. The black-robed young man took a deep breath and glanced at Lin Sun coldly with his head held high. This was the territory of Golden Crow, where there were many masters. He didn't believe Lin Sun dared to do anything. Bang! But Lin Sun's reaction was beyond everyone's expectations. Without saying a word, he reached out and grabbed the black-robed young man. He raised his hand and slapped him. The sound was crisp and clear. The surrounding people were shocked. What a fast speed. In just a blink of an eye, a top figure of Golden Crow was killed. You're courting death. The black-robed young man roared. His cheeks were red and swollen. Even if he exerted all his strength, he couldn't break free. Pa! Lin Sun slapped him again. The slap was so loud that blood spurted from his mouth and nose. In the process, the other masters of Golden Crow had already made their moves. But they were shocked to find that any attack that got close to Lin Sun was like a clay ox entering the sea, dissolved and devoured. I'm going to kill you. Whoever dares to provoke Golden Crow must die. The black-robed young man was completely driven mad and roared furiously. Golden flames surged all over his body. He operated his secret skill, wanting to fight Lin Sun with all his might. Unfortunately, in front of Lin Sun, he had no advantage at all. He couldn't break free from Lin Sun's imprisonment at all. Golden Crow is nothing. This is the absolute domain, not Sunset Valley. What's more, I may have to go to Sunset Valley in person in the future. Lin Sun slapped him again without hesitation. Pa! 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 The slaps were like dense drumbeats. In an instant, the black-robed young man's teeth were peeled off. His eyes and mouth were slanted, and his face was red and swollen like a pig's head. What a clown! The black-robed young man roared. However, his teeth were peeled off and his mouth was leaking air. Even his words had changed. Lin Sun was stunned for a moment. Then he realized that the young man was shouting, "Kill him for me." Next to him, a group of Golden Crow powerhouses complained incessantly. They had already made their moves, but none of them worked. All their attacks were swallowed up and dissolved into nothingness. Even the treasures he took out would be easily sent flying. It was like being invulnerable. Bang! Lin Sun knocked the black-robed young man out and put him away, intending to use him as a hostage. What about you? Do you know the whereabouts of those two? Lin Sun's black eyes were cold as he glanced at the Golden Crow powerhouses who besieged him. Forget it. Even if we know, we will never tell you. When the seventh prince comes back, he will kill you immediately. These powerhouses gnashed their teeth and looked resentful. Puff! Lin Sun's figure flashed, and he rushed forward. In a flash, he killed the short and fat man who shouted the loudest. The others were horrified and shouted, "This is the immortal burning ancient city. You will only be suppressed by the major forces if you do this." Boom! Lin Sun's figure suddenly burst out with terrifying divine light. With a gentle sweep, endless Taoist light flowed, showing an invincible momentum. The Golden Crow powerhouses coughed up blood and retreated. In the distance, the onlookers were trembling with fear. This demon god Lin was too domineering. He went to the Golden Crow's branch to vent his anger. Especially Wang Dong. He'd been dumbstruck since long ago. He'd utterly never imagined that a friend he'd casually encountered would actually be such an incomparably ferocious and ruthless person. P.S. There are many gifts today. No matter how many they are all good intentions. I won't leave my name here. I thank you on behalf of Demon God Lin.